Muted? Am I unmuted?
Now you're good.
Now am I good? Hello, good morning. Okay. Looks like everybody. So Kevin, Elizabeth, Carrie, Kevin, Jonathan. Who's missing? Nobody's missing. Jamin, Ale, Rex is here in the room. So I believe that's everybody, right, Laura? What happened? Everybody in the room? Or no, everybody on? Natalie? Oh, there's Natalie. Okay. All righty then. I don't know that we need to do a roll call. I think we can see everybody up there. We're not that formal with this group. So welcome back to day 2 of Code Committee Energy. Again today, just a couple of housekeeping items. You should have your updated agenda with the anticipated review items today. And so you'll note there on the agenda that our next meeting has been bumped to the 30th. Sorry, I was looking down. I don't know if that's working. Bumped to the 30th for our, once we get finished, we should be able to finish up today with the subject matter, the energy stuff that's on today, and then we'll dive into the rest of the code chapter, probably starting with chapter 3, 2. I don't think there's much in definitions, but 2 or 3 we'll figure it out. And then let's see what else. So just a couple of reminders as we get going. There's times when Laura has been screen sharing, which is it's really helpful when we're making changes on the fly, and she can type them up there and we can see them and make sure, especially the proponent. But there's the downside to the screen share sometimes is it makes the rest of you look really tiny up there on the screen and trying to manage. So we'll be bouncing in and out of screen share. I don't know. Hopefully you should have, the committee members should have all the documents in front of them. So if you see us doing that, it's just for clarity, sometimes trying to stay on top. Just a reminder too, if you're, obviously the committee is open to discuss ad nauseum things or proposals as we're going along. But if you're a guest, please raise your hand when you're speaking. So, and announce yourself just so we can get that on the record. That's very helpful. And again, with the chat, try to avoid the chat. We're not actively monitoring the chat. Most of the time, somebody will catch it. But it would be preferable if you, unless you're putting up like a link or something to a document or something that's helpful, or an internet link or something. Yeah, or an administrative question or something. If you're having problems with the system or anything, you can shoot that up and Laura will look at it for the chat. Rex again is in the room here. He won't be up on your screen. And I think that is it. Look here. That is all I have. Anything from committee before I turn it over to Mark Heiser to get going on the energy stuff? Nada, no, nothing. All right, quiet group this morning. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Mark Heiser and we're going to dive into the review.
Thank you, Eric. Mark Heiser with Division. Before we get started today, there were a couple of requests for some additional information, and I wanted to share some documents on the screen real quick. First was to show, and I'm trying to, if Laura, you can bring up, I believe the first document is the let's see here, the PDF summary. That document, yes, if you could zoom in on that just a little bit to show on our analysis of the models that we looked at for the progression of the code and sort of where we started from, for the 2021 code and the agreements we've had on sort of how we would look at modeling and looking at average energy use. For the 2021 code, we modeled, just real quick to go through this, is that we modeled both looking at option 7, which was the Windows piece that is being deleted from the 2023 code. Results were significantly worse than that for the 2021 code using option 1. We developed an average result based upon an agreed upon weighting that we've talked with energy stakeholders on, assuming that 25% of homes might use option 7 and the remaining 75% wouldn't. So we came up with a result at the very bottom. I know this might be hard for some people to see, is a statewide average and regulated energy use, excuse me, of 69.59 MMBTUs per year for that home, for the regulated load. For the 2023 code, since we are moving, well, A, getting rid of the option, and B, we're looking at moving ducts inside as one path, or still allowing deeply buried ducts to continue to be used, but requiring that second additional measure. We have really on the screen showing 4 different potential options. The first one, of course, is just the standard home if the ducts were inside. The second option, third and fourth, are looking at 3 different potential variations of using an additional measure. What that comes out to, if you'll look down at the bottom, when we do weighting of 40%, potentially going with ducts inside, and then the remainder using 40%, 10% and 10% as you're going from left to right, or possible uses of other combinations. We didn't do all of them. We sort of threw a dart at the board and started with those, but also expecting that we'll talk about some cost items later, that when we do that and then bring in additional efficiency credits of what's going to happen for 2023 homes, looking at, of course, which our program cannot model a smart thermostat. So that's done through a separate analysis, looking only at the HVAC energy use. We come up with an average weighted statewide of 57.65 MMBTUs. That's sort of where we're looking at what the average home of our prototype home will be using based on the baseline. When Executive Order 1720 came out, we had a lot of discussions about what would go into the analysis and what would be that minimum target energy threshold. So using REM rate, and again, using the same weighting for construction home types, you will see there's a ZERH buried ducts path. That is the minimum target that we were expected to achieve. This was set before we filled in what would be the 2023 code items. And that is came out to a 59.4 MMBTU annual energy use. There are things that we get some additional credit for here in Oregon, just simply that's the 2017 version. So we've had some additional pieces that, came with doing this that get us where we see a safety factor here or using the assumptions we have stated. And we have I've had that spreadsheet available for people to look at for what we assumed for that ZERH buried ducts path, what that target is, and of course, what we're assuming based upon the current code and the discussions we've had so far. If we go down a page on this, we took the, again, using REM rate, that is the software we've been using for the residential path. If you'll notice, we can zoom in just a little bit on this. Pretty much all of them came out. Actually, we've looked at even the worst case homes from the MMBTUs, of the energy modeling of the different options. And when plugging in, they give you a 0 into REM rate, which is used for the Zero Energy Ready Home program. It will give you a passing score, including a HERS score of, we'll show as well. If you scroll down a little bit more on this, to do the Zero Energy Ready Home program, there are things that are done outside of what's in the building code. So if you're actually going for full certification, you would do things for the Safer Living program and additional, there's some indoor air quality items that you might do if you're going to go through this Zero Energy Ready Home program. But from an energy standpoint, you take what is in the 2023 code. Every one of the ones that we looked at will give you show that it's ready for the Zero Energy Ready Home program. There, if you want to scroll down a couple more pages, we can show some more that we did. Zoom out a little bit. This one is for, and the one point of the Zero Energy Ready Home program outputs that I want to note for everyone is that REM-rate doesn't have an additional checkbox that would allow us to model a smart thermostat. It doesn't have a checkbox that would help us model the impact of, excuse me, the latest Oregon Department of Energy appliance standards. They have now made it that shower heads in Oregon are now 1.8 GPM versus our prior code, which was 2.0 GPM. So we don't have a way to show those additional impacts. They aren't included in this. So that's additional efficiency, even above and beyond seeing that we can achieve ZER. You can get a ZERH ready printout, not including even some things that can't be modeled or shown in this report. So that's some background on the modeling and where we got to what we have today. If there are any questions, would be happy to answer those, or we can go on to the next piece.
That's really great to see. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So Laura, if you could bring up the other sheet, would like to, this is our preliminary. Yes, sorry, it's not on current letterhead. But for a look at, excuse me, the expected cost implications of how we come up with the average cost expected statewide and the average energy savings statewide. So the previous spreadsheet you saw, that's used to develop what the average annual energy savings are. And then we sort of take a look at, well, in order to achieve the 2023 energy code, looking at this, where we started from based on those same assumptions used in the to develop the 2021 efficiency level, what are the changes that are involved? And we do a weighted average applying the expected cost to go from the 2021 to the 2023 code. To give, we have a general summary statement here. We're going to do a little bit more on the 1,200 square foot home to really verify that when you change home size that everything's working out exactly correct. But we have good numbers for the 2376 square foot prototype home. All right. Thank you, Laura. Is that the average statewide cost increase impact would be about $1,446 and would return an average energy savings of $184 per year. Now, those are using, of course, current costs, the best things we have available, and of course, since we've begun all this work and set up our standard for the numbers we would use, of course, we've seen an increase in the cost of energy as well. Next year, we'll have different numbers, or next code cycle, we'll have different numbers to use to reflect that. But the resultant net impact would probably be a simple payback of 7.2 years. And when you're looking at what the average cost increase would be and what the increase in mortgage would be, you would still see most likely a net positive cash flow for this. When we looked at the 1,200 square foot home, we're still working on those. We want to make sure we have everything correct on that. You don't get a cut in half of the initial cost savings. We're expecting probably, excuse me. Probably a net cost increase for the 1,200 square foot home of around $1,167. There are some things that won't be similar for both home sizes. The annual energy savings is probably expected to be more along the lines of $110 per year with an estimated simple payback of 10.6 years. But we want to make sure we've got all of our ducks in a row on that one before we go to the board. And again, the 1,200 square foot is primarily for the use of the RMSB of making their final determination. And of course, the final price that's included in that would be including all of the revisions that you'll be looking at, not just Chapter 11, but this tells you about the Chapter 11 revisions. If you can scroll down a little bit more, Laura, I do want to point out that when you're building to the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code and you produce a HERS report, and it shows that you're in the ZERH ready, and you can also get an Energy Star ready because that's even less restrictive, reminding that there will be $2,500 incentives for homes meeting the Energy Star program and $5,000 if you do all of the steps that are required for the Zero Energy Ready Home program. So those that are going to go through those steps, the 2023 code could on average give you a net positive savings if you put, say, if there's $1,000 to $2,000 of depending on if there's $1,000 associated with getting your Energy Star certificate, the average is going to be a net positive possibly. So, and again, all of this is based on averages and your mileage may vary. Batteries are not included. Items in rear view mirror may be closer than they appear. We just can't say all of them. Things are averaging. The range of costs can, of course, depending on where you were and in using the prior code, we have further in the report, and we'll post this online, looking at how we got to our costs. We did look at, for the water heater issue, we went this week, rechecked numbers yesterday to see what it would cost for improving the cost of, or the cost difference or the equipment, and then looked at, there's further explanation later on what we looked at for the impacts of doing a improved water heater. Have some minor differences, but come up fairly close to what was done in one of the other reports included. So it is in the $900 to $1,000 range based on what we're seeing. But of course, that would be an average statewide, depending on where the water heaters are located and different savings that come with each one. So moving forward, if there aren't any questions at this time, what we're going to do, we've had a request to do some of the more complicated items a little later. One of our proponents isn't available, and it really started us off on something a little slower and easier. As everybody's coffee is slowly working their way through, to begin with actually the proposals that are related to the Windows program sections that begin with NF. And we can look at the proposal NF 113 first to see what relative to NF 113 first, and if the I need to find my documents, of course. You want to bring that one up, Laura? We are at next to the last, we're down at this one will be NF 1113 insulating glass certification. The proponent would like to come up. We've noted that this is really a look at cleaning up language about how you can get a an accredited insulated window. And a little more background, this is the information we're going through now is for windows that don't have a NFRC certification on them. So we've actually through some legislation that dates back a long time, having methods for small windows manufacturers to build windows and be able to sell them in the state.
Good morning, Steve Strawn from JELD-WEN Windows and Doors. I'm not sure how to take the slower and easier part of this, but I do appreciate adjusting the schedule a little bit. So as Mr. Heiser had alluded to, the IG certification program is not part of IECC because they don't have a program such as Oregon's with the small manufacturers. So in order to ensure or assure, I should say, some insulating glass durability, we're simply updating the standards that are referenced. The standards, ASTM E774-97 was withdrawn in 2006. The SGCC program is, or I'm sorry, SIGMA program was discontinued and merged into another program. So all I'm doing really with this is just simply updating. We're going to bring in ASTM E2190, the 2019 version of that standard in the language. I believe, Mark, and some of the work that you and I had done also added in or changed some of the language a bit to call it accredited insulating glass unit certification program. So it's the change would the only change would be in that last bit, the ASTM E2190 standard specification for insulating glass unit performance and evaluation shall be certified by an accredited insulating glass unit certification program. I've got on that.
Thank you, Mr. Strawn. Any questions on this? This is really looking at when they're doing when a small window manufacturer is buying glazing, that the numbers that they use and come from that are certified to the latest standard.
Effectively, you're just updating the code language to standards that are accepted by the industry and have been. Virtually anybody that makes insulating glass units is going to certify their process through this durability standard. So it's not going to add any any additional impact. It's just updating the standards that are that should be referenced rather than adding new requirements.
Any questions?
Sounds easy.
Yeah.
This is Rex. So a couple things, Mark, you put on your summary sheet that this is a repeat of other proposals. So is this address that?
Yes, Rex from the division. There are several proposals that come in of either having referencing the reference standard date number, either in the body of the code or back in the reference standards. We're going to address all of these just to let everyone know that we will be addressing the year of the standard, the reference standards in the back of the code versus
Got you.
the body of the code.
I get that now.
That's all that one is.
Just sorry that dumb this down to my level a little bit. There's no opportunity or risk here of an unintended consequences of eliminating some other manufacturers' windows by changing this language, or no? Steve is shaking his head no.
No, Rex, there is none. Again, the standards that are currently referenced are no longer supported by ASTM. The insulating glass certification program that is referenced is no longer a viable program. It's long since disappeared and merged into others. So what I'm referencing are the current standards. In terms of eliminating participation by other manufacturers, there really is none.
Okay. Well, I'm in favor of this. I don't see a downside.
Yeah, it just sounds like a clarification to me. Same.
I support the proposal.
I do as well.
I do as well. This is Kevin. This is Jamin. I have no objection to it.
All right. And we've got a general thumbs up on that one, unless I see, I'm looking to see if there are any. All right, not seeing anybody putting a thumbs down on that. All right, moving on to the next section, which is relative to section NF 1114. Again, this is really just getting us to update from, yes, to see how old this is, from a 2001 FRC standard to the 2020 version. It shows how much people really participate in this small windows program, but it is time to get to the latest editions of the reference standards. So if the proponent would like to speak to that.
I think you've done a fine job of defining that. As I reviewed the proposed code, just checking, make sure that all of the reference standards and everything were up to date. This one caught me pretty quickly. As a former chair of the NFRC board, I sort of watch all of that stuff. So it's just bringing it up to date. Again, as you alluded to, it's that year of the reference standard will be really more referenced in the reference standards rather than in the text of the code. So all I'm doing is just updating it.
Is Rex good here?
Adelaide has her hand up.
Yes, Adelaide?
Sorry, I had to find the right button. So sorry, I'm just a little lost on following. So I have the agenda, but I don't see what is, so we went to NF 14 at the very bottom. The list of public code proposals are identified on the website as like 1 through 29. Do you know which one this is so I can correlate them and look at both of them at the same time?
This is Rex. This would be 27.
Okay, sorry, it's just they don't, I get lost between all the 29 of them, so thank you. Let me look at number 29 then. Thank you very much for your time.
27.
Oh, 27.
Yeah, I'll just quickly me too that one, just for further process improvement. If there was an ability to code or better correlate these, so it was more obvious which one, especially when there's similar proposals from the same proponent, that would help me as well. So not just you. Thanks.
Did everybody get so Laura posted, sent out the updated matrix that is numbered? Is that what everybody's working off of, just to make sure?
I think this is Rex again. I think the issue though is on the web page, they're listed at 1 through 30. And when I was doing my initial preparation, I used those numbers and the matrix doesn't really cross-reference those.
Yeah, same. I've been using the proposal summary that has marked your comments, and the proposal has been very helpful.
I think I have did my own cross-referencing so I can contribute those numbers as we get to them.
So while we're on number 27, cross-reference to NF 1114, and what is the other cross-reference we can give?
When we already approved?
Yeah, no, on the one we're currently on. NF 11114. 7. Okay.
Thank you, because I was confused on the last one. I didn't make my own cross-reference, so thank you.
And I'm assuming no other comments at this point? Kind of good on updating the numbers, looking for any ongoing, still questions or thumbs down, so I think we're okay on that. So to wrap up the wonderful world of Windows, at least until we get to moving on to the Chapter 44 reference standards.
And that would be this is Rex, number 30 on the original webpage.
And number 30, this really catches up with, sort of summarizes previous proposals and may be slightly redundant based on prior actions, is that we will have the dates for the 2017 version of AMA CSA 101 IS2A 440, the 2019 version of ASTM E2190, NFRC 100 2020, which is in model code as well now, and NFRC 400-2020. This is really just it's more an editorial proposal, and I'm assuming that based on prior actions, there wouldn't be any, unless we see a request to go back to a 2001 version. I'm not seeing it at this point. We can move forward from here and take this one as.
Yes, support approval.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So at this point, yeah, to the committee, we had, do we want to just walk through the green items and show so far? Or if anybody saw, really the question is if anyone seen something that they felt wasn't.
I did have a couple things I noticed,
Okay.
if now's an okay time. So under N 1105.3 installation of ducts, we added it looks like added as a separate exception, number 3, the ducts with insulated to the R27. It seems like that maybe should be a note on the deep buried ones, or it needs to add the requirement of the second additional energy measure. If that makes sense, but it may work well just as a note under those deep bury options that, you know, alternately you can have a total of R27 around the ducts. Or would that option not require the second energy measure like the deep bury option does?
And that is a good catch. From my understanding of the intent was this was in lieu of the R19 above with R8. Not as an overall.
Not as a separate option.
A separate option. It was an optional insulation path to deeply buried insulated ducts.
And then I'm still a little, I know I mentioned it last time too, the option of the ducts in the unvented crawl space outside of the thermal envelope, of having that wall insulation in there. I think there'll be some confusion, because the way I understand it, if you have the crawl insulated and mechanically ventilated per 408.3, that would be considered in the thermal envelope, and they wouldn't need that second energy measure. That's it on N 1105.3.2 for the proposal. Number 3. I just think there'll be some confusion at applying that.
I understand on that one, and I think the correction would be if it shouldn't say or walls are insulated because that does turn it to inside the thermal envelope. So part 3 of N1105.3.2. The intent is to show if it's was intending to show that if there is a path to do an unvented crawl space where the thermal envelope barrier is at the floor line. And this is intended to show what would happen if you had the insulation at the floor line. And so the second part is showing, yes, where it would be inside the thermal envelope. That is a good catch.
And then I had one other thought. Sorry to have so much. I thought the beginning of each of those exceptions, the ducts deeply buried and the ducts in the invented crawl space, that says when selecting two measures from table N1101.12, then those things, that's a little confusing to me. That almost makes it sound like that's an option, but it says previously that if you use one of those options, then you have to select a second energy measure. I don't know, does that sound weird to anyone else?
Okay.
I agree.
That it becomes, the general understanding that it becomes redundant and potentially confusing language because
It almost sounds optional or.
I agree, Carrie. I don't see where the new language when providing two. Maybe I need to.
It's under each of those, the N1105.3.1, that first paragraph. When it talks about ducts deeply buried shall be in accordance with all of the following when selecting two measures from table N11. And then it says that on each of those deep buried and ducts in the inventive crawl option.
Whereas in exception 4 above, it says they shall select two measures. So
Right.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
I agree too.
I can
Good catch.
propose a revision would be instead of saying when using exception 4 of N1105.3 would be a better,
there you go.
Yes.
and it might wind up actually being exception 3 once we look at
Right.
language.
And while we're on this patch, exception 3 says vapor retarder, as in it looks like someone using a vape pen. So VAPOR would be the correct spelling.
That's
So, Laura, you want to try and I'll be mulling in the meantime while Laura's doing some work
Okay.
to what to look at for that exception number 3.
Is Rex, just general observation. I'm not a plan reviewer, but this seems this whole area is very complex to me. So maybe do the first initial cleanup and get this back to the plan reviewers on the call. And this is going to be useful now for my plan reviews. I mean, that's what we're trying to accomplish here, right?
Yeah, that was part of the idea of the new exception 3 originally anyway, was to
clarify.
to just clarify what we want is an R27. Have a nice day. We
Right.
don't really care where the duct is. We just want an R27. It can be in the crawl space. It can be in the attic. It can be in the garage. We don't care as long as it's insulated to R27.
That won't get it.
What concern I have is with the change where you went from a pre-manufactured insulated flex with an R8 with basically a double wall to just saying a vapor retarder. Is this issue was brought up last week is condensation. If all you're doing is putting a vapor retarder directly over a flex duct, there's nothing to prevent condensation in an attic space. So I think you're opening up the possibility of a lot of condensation and mold and moisture issues in the future, unless you clarify that vapor retarder needs to be separated from the duct, give it a buffer. So there's some insulation between the duct and the vapor retarder. Otherwise, there's no point in having a vapor retarder. They're literally putting a vapor retarder over top of a duct that's already sealed.
Yep.
Agree.
So I get that the verbiage that was agreed on last week makes it a lot more flexible for builders, and I'm a builder. But at the end of the day, it's not the best product for the end user, the homeowner. You know, you're just opening up the door to mold problems down the road, and you're going to be readdressing this verbiage at the next code cycle, trying to fix it if we don't address it now.
But for clarification, as discussed last time, a vapor retarder is not actually required in the code currently. So as you alluded, the double wall insulated duct is one that's commonly used, but it is not a requirement by the building code. So this is an additional measure, and it would be one that building departments would provide outreach and say, oh, that needs to be on that side. I think what we discussed last week was BCD was going to update their white paper to have the illustration showing it was on the other side. So code can't always be a how-to manual, I guess would be the thing. Especially as we talked last week, when we're in different heat and cooling cycles, technically the vapor barrier needs to be in different spots. So it's kind of one of those building science is saying putting it somewhere about here, and it's going to be close enough to helping prevent condensation. So it's still not going to be a catch-all for everything.
But it would be, I don't know. I guess I understood that in the previous verbiage, it said in R8 insulated duct and R19 on top of it or underneath it, depending on if it's attic or crawl.
It did, but it didn't require a vapor retarder because the code does not require a vapor retarder for the ducts.
But in R19 manufactured duct is a double wall. There's the internal duct.
But there's nothing in the code.
And then
There's no
a vapor retarder on the outside. So
there's nothing in the code requiring the R8 duct insulation. When this provision came in, we saw quite a few steel ducts being used, especially when there were supply constraints and they couldn't get flex ducts. So again, there's nothing in the code saying a vapor retarder is required.
Planning is last week that was the verbiage that was added, saying a vapor retarder was required when ducts are buried in the attic.
Nope, that is not the case.
Yeah, I think we just added that to that exception 3.
So I'd like to sort of.
I had a couple comments too on the measures tables.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to summarize first off. We sort of have one structural clarification of saying where for both N1105.3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 is the charging statement instead of saying when selecting two measures, saying from table N1101.2 paren 2, changing that to saying when utilizing exception, probably needs to be exception, turn back to what is currently numbered as exception 4, when utilizing exception 4 from N1105.3 would make it clearer if, from what I got from the building officials looking at this, you know, instead of doubling down on saying doing two measures, this is going back saying when utilizing that exception. That's what these three following sections are for. If you're using the current exception 4 of N1105.3. That
I think that would be more clear. Yeah, just to have it in one place and then list those three options.
we have a general agreement on that.
Makes sense.
Yes.
So to clarify, the second, are we proposing that the second package would not be required for our new exception 3, the R27 option?
Okay, well, we're addressing first, just making sure that first item we're just doing is doing the enforcement clarification. And then we're going to look at this exception 3 of where it was actually intended to go from our understanding of the last call and of the last meeting. So
Okay, sorry for jumping the gun.
Clearing up to make sure that when you're using exception 4, you're complying with either 3.1, 3.2, or 3.3. And it's already been stated in the exception that you have to do 2 additional measures from the table, and this is getting rid of a confusing redundancy. So that's clarification 1. Then we're going to get to what's currently listed as exception 3 and recapping intent and what with the division understood the intent was as well. So, Laura, do you want to?
Yeah, take a look.
So the green on that is showing that at each one of those charging statements, instead of saying two measures, they all go back to, if you'll see on the left side of the screen, that they're all referring back to exception 4. Then we have to look at really the intent, the vision understanding of the intent, and I'm glad this was caught, was that exception 3 would really be a subpart to exception 4 that more, and I'm going to put this out as a general statement of my understanding, is that deeply buried ducts may be insulated with R27 insulation and vapor retarder in lieu of R19 cover over R8 ductwork. I think that was the intent of the group. Last go around, that was my understanding of it, was that this was an alternate to
Oh, that's true.
duct. That was, so it could either be a subpart of 4 or it becomes a subpart of 3.1 and 3.3.
Yeah, that's true. And since it's not actually within the thermal envelope, you'd still have to pick 2 measures, right?
Correct.
So it needs to fall under that category.
Right.
So
And looking at this a little closer, there's a wording I think that would make the vapor barrier issue perhaps cleaner, maybe. Something like where the duct is encased in R27 insulation with a vapor retarder. But that's perhaps mincing words.
I think we had encased, and I think we changed it to insulated. We had some other
Okay,
word than
fair enough.
insulated.
We
No,
did.
moved back to insulated.
Fair enough. And David's put a piece in the chat about adding a vapor retarder of 0.1 per PER or greater, just to be clear.
What? Sorry, should be perm. I'm
Oh,
terrible.
you're right.
Yes. So
For permeability, yeah.
that would just eliminate somebody using Visqueen, which would be a
Right.
thing that would trap moisture.
Oh, we have other code sections that discuss what is a vapor retarder versus a barrier.
The definition.
Yeah. There are 3
Okay.
classes. I'm not sure. You might want to look.
Oh,
Sorry, you might want to look at the definition. There's 3 classes of vapor retarders, and the class 1, Visqueen is part of that. Like class 1 is 0.1 perm or less. So class 1 is actually vapor barriers, but they're still called a vapor retarder. Class 2 and 3 are above 0.1 perms. So, and I don't know the definition if it gets into those 3 different classes or not, but what divides it is the perm rating.
So, thank you, Mr. Heslam. It could be noted that with a minimum class 2 vapor retarder, and then it would align with, I think, the intent and the minimum there. So
That would work.
I feel like there's an opportunity to misinterpret minimum class 2. Like what's minimum max, does that mean class 1 and class 2? Does it mean class 2 and 3?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
With a
I
class
would just, since it's not a long list, just source all of the specific defined classes in the code already that we are saying would comply.
I'm
It is
still
that-
having a hard time picturing the install method of a vapor retarder around a duct. So, I mean, can anyone explain what you're picturing? Are you just draping some material over top of a duct? I'm just having a hard time picturing what the intent of that verbiage is to achieve a vapor retarder around a duct. It just doesn't make sense to me.
So that's going to be up to each individual builder to decide. That's not us as a code body to decide how they should do it, other than where we want it to be in that case. But the ones that we've seen where they've actually done this, they just use a craft faced bat and have the craft face on the outside. Boom, they're done.
Yeah. If I may, to the committee to respond, there, I have hard ducts in my attic that they're not wrapped with this much insulation, but they're wrapped with insulation. And then outside of that, there actually is a vapor retarder wrapped around them. It was done in sort of a commercial application kind of way. And you don't see it very often in residential, but that is what I have in my own attic.
Thank you.
I just, there's so much that's open to interpretation. R27 in the attic, it could be elevated above. It doesn't even specify it has to be deeply buried.
That's the intent. It's not supposed to be deeply buried. We're giving builders options. If you, as your company, don't want to use it, then don't use it. And yes, the entire code is up to interpretation. You just work with your local building department, and we'll help clarify how it's being interpreted in your neighborhood. Or, as we had already talked, BCD is going to update their white paper and specify what BCD's approach is, which is generally what we're all going to follow, because we're all figuring it out too.
And I get that, but when you say just work with your local building department, we build in 5 states, hundreds of counties, hundreds of city ofs. I can't have that argument with every city building official, every county building official over and over. So I just want it to be a little more clear what the code is stating, so it's not so open to interpretation.
Well, here's an easy way to address that also, and I don't want to seem adversarial in this one, but don't use that provision, then use the deeply buried. If you're having trouble with your local building department, it seems pretty clear to me, and at least for us, we enforce the language of the code, which is you can put it anywhere as long as it's R27 and you wrap it in a visqueen. So you come and show me that you did that, that's what you're going to get approved as.
So you said visqueen, but I thought it was...
Or not visqueen, but a vapor retarder, sorry. Yes, vapor retarder.
Yeah, I mean, is it not just okay enough that this is one exception of other options, many options?
No, and I appreciate the flexibility that is beneficial to everyone. It just, I don't know, I look at it and I just see it's going to be a very confusing issue if we choose that path, and something that would have to be, a lot of discussion with a lot of different building officials in a lot of counties and cities. And it just, I don't know. Seems very vague.
You must work in a lot of unflexible jurisdictions. I honestly, looking at this language,
We do,
I've been doing
trust
this
me.
for a long time, and I don't see any struggle in the way the word language is worded in reality from a building official standpoint. It's, did you insulate it? How are you going to insulate it? And are you putting a vapor retarder on there? The most question you may get is, hey, that's not the craft face. What vapor retarder are you using to make sure now it's a class 2 or class 3? That seems like your discussion points. It's not going to be as challenging as I think you're trying to make it out to be.
I think it is a good point.
Where would the vapor barrier or retarder be located? On the outside of the insulation or the inside? Because it doesn't specify that.
You can put it anywhere you want to, technically where the code is, but you would want to put it on the outside because that's what we're suggesting, and that's what the white paper is going to say. And you're going to follow building science, not what the code says, right?
Another point is you need to follow the manufacturer's installation instructions. So if it is craft face, then you need to follow what they say.
From the division standpoint and our recognition of what was brought up the last time, this group wanted flexibility for, there may be some locations where you may have to run a length of duct work in a spot where you couldn't bury the duct. Just couldn't happen, and you may want to run a section just wrapped in R, the equivalent of that R27 to get to that value. And that was one piece. There, another one that we seem to have seen from this was there was a short period where, and it may still happen, you may not be able to find R8 insulated duct, and this is another way of getting to that level. The language, from looking at a flexibility standpoint, you may look at wrapping the duct in, say, an R19 for the first level, or a different layer, putting on that would allow you to put on a smaller vapor retarder sheet layer. No, it's buying less material, and then do the remaining wrap to get to the R27 level. That's where I'm seeing some of the flexibility, but most of all, we will try, yes, the tech guides that we have, the white papers that have been noted, will be updated to note this, to sort of give a few more examples. My good friend Eric here will be doing wonderful CAD work once again. Continuing to give him a shout out for all the work he's done on these things to make good looking diagrams. But we would try and show different examples so that building officials would have an idea of, and that's why we're having this discussion, is getting that intent of what you're trying to put forward here, so that we can set some examples up for building officials on this, so that, and they're always free to call and look at it, but to get that consistency statewide is the reason for the tech paper. So just a little assurance on that for statewide application of this. We're really trying to make this as easy as possible for everybody. Thanks.
Those technical bulletins really are helpful. I know they've been helpful in this code cycle in our department. I do think it's a good point. If the screen would be an issue, like David mentioned in the chat, to specify the perm that's required. I don't know enough about that to know if that matters, but.
Have we covered that with the class 2 definition or designation?
Yes, we did.
Okay. While we're still on ducts, on the matrix that Laura sent out, I guess I need to clarify. I thought we had disapproved of the requirement to test if there's that 10 feet of ducts located outside, but it showed on the matrix as approved. I didn't see anything about that in the draft though. So just wanted some clarification of what we had decided on that.
That was my recollection too.
Carrie,
That it was disapproved?
which code section or proposal number we're talking about?
Well, it's on page of the matrix. It's on page 2. It's listed as N1101.1, but it should be, I believe, N1105.3. It was proposal 16.
And my recollection was, not picking on you, Kevin, sorry. Both of Kevin's proposals we disapproved.
Yeah, no,
around the blower door and stuff.
While I would like for it to have been approved, it wasn't, and it's shown correctly in the draft. But yeah, as was mentioned, the section number and the approved, not approved were incorrect for that one. So
Okay,
thanks for catching that.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, agreed. This is Rex. That was not approved.
I also had a couple that I noted. PP10, which was Kevin Duell from Northwest Natural. The tankless water heater one, I think he withdrew that one. If I
Correct. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. And so that would affect the table 1101.1 print 2. And so measure 2 would just remain as it was for options A and C. In other words, the green text would vanish or revert, or however you want to put that.
If we could have just a slight pause here so we can catch up on.
Sure, sure.
Laura's had to restart her computer, so we need to take just maybe
Technical difficulties were.
maybe let's
Understood.
10. No, we haven't been gone that long, but she needs to be able to keep up on.
Of course.
So let's do a 10-minute, come back at 10:45.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Getting our ducks in a row here. Mark's over working with Laura. Her computer did an automatic update right in the middle of everything, so it, yeah. So they're getting caught up. Mark's trying to get Laura caught up and then we'll get going. Okay, I think we are good to go. Laura's caught up. If everybody's back and ready, kick it back to Mark and
All right.
get rolling.
To get our ducks in a row from the conversations we have had and to get intent and good language, what we're seeing in front of us is really, first off, we're going to, where the exception 3 was located, we're going to try and relocate down to where, first off, when we get to these ducks deeply buried in attic, we have noted that it's when using section 5.3, exception 4, and that's going to get renumbered, that we bring in an exception. We took the language as said, when HVAC ductwork shall be permitted to be located outside the thermal envelope where the duct is insulated to a minimum of R27 with a minimum class. So we should make that minimum class 2 vapor retarder. There are other ways to say that, sort of in lieu of R8 duct insulation buried in R19 there. But that is the intent that we got from the conversations we've had today and trying to see if we have some. And under 3.2, oh, we have one other item under item 3, Laura. Scroll up a little bit. Part 3, we were going to scratch from at the end of our minimum R30, we put a period there and delete everything after that, because that ductwork does actually wind up inside the thermal envelope. That was the intent that we got from that. So that is what we found from, and then there's a repeat once again for when using exception number 4. So those are our different.
Will it now be exception number 3 though?
Yeah.
Oh, you got it as 3. Okay.
And that last exception should be minimum class 2 again. There we go.
And that is used for vapor retarders for, I believe, when it's walls. I think it's wall painting or ceiling painting. I forget which one. But there's another.
I thought we were going to get rid of the minimum, the word minimum.
This is Rex. I think the discussion was, is there 2 options of classes that would accomplish this? Instead of saying minimum, you say maybe it's a class 2.
Class 2, yeah.
Is there 3 classes?
We either have to say class 1 or class 2, or state that, or excuse me, class 3.
Somebody mentioned that the word minimum I might not know if a 1 is better than a 3, for example.
Yeah. Just for clarity, yeah, they brought it up. I would just do the class 2 and class 3, and that way it's just clear.
Right. Spell it out.
The location, I would prefer flexibility on, because like Mark gave a good example, and I think that would be a great solution of, using say an R15, have your vapor retarder there, and then another R15 type thing to achieve your minimum R27. So I still like the loose, so that way it's flexible for what the builders may want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Should class, just to totally pick this to death, should class be capitalized? There you go.
But
Or a new
she's on it.
This is technical writing, not grammatically correct writing.
That's right.
So we have general agreement that this cleans up the language and gets the intent of what was discussed at last meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Love it.
Thank you, Carrie, for bringing this to our attention and everyone's input.
Yeah, no problem.
With that, were there any other items people may have found when looking through the green? Of course, you could bring up if you find other items in future meetings. You have a lot more to go, but we'll try and get energy wrapped up today.
Well, these are quick. Table N 1101.1 print 2 additional measures.
Yes, Kevin?
So I did withdraw my proposal, which would have left option or measure 2, all those green language changes would not happen. In other words, option B would be upgraded to UEF, but the rest would just remain as it was. Because the committee pointed out that all that really did was remove options that was there.
Oh, you just brought something to my attention that we would need to correct on item A.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, never mind. We got rid of the regardless
There we go.
of gallon. So,
excellent. And then likewise in the additions table, or whatever it is, small table 1101.3.2, we agreed to change 92 in number 6, change 92% to 94%.
And we need to update the matrix on that. It's shown as disapprove.
Yeah. Yeah, same for the table above, that was shown as approved in the matrix.
Mhm.
That's what I had.
all right. We ready to really dive in and go back to the order we had on code review now? Looking at, try and find the PP number. Nine two. Would you like to have another easy one? One thing we've noted is that the PP7 and the proponent would like to also sort of have that discussion at the same time as the 09 options, which are PP 23, 24, as well as the additional addition C credits, PP 27. They're sort of all going to need to, they'll kind of have common discussion. So would like to maybe get a few of the remaining, maybe simpler ones out of the way, if that's acceptable with the committee.
I agree.
Sure.
Sounds great.
And one for N1108.2, PP 21, or looking to bring in the reach code references to the We Stand plumbing code. The one in the analysis on that, the efficiency measures that are in the We Stand have really been adopted by the plumbing board into the standard plumbing code. And just from a general standpoint, from our analysis, is that the remainder of the We Stand is really what you would call just installation standards if you do something, and are really part of what the plumbing code is going to, or the plumbing board is going to do for their, how you do a gray water system, pieces like that, that are outside the scope of the building code. So,
I appreciate, as a maker of that proposal, I appreciate that analysis, Mark, and thank you and the committee for your time, and I'll withdraw that proposal.
I like the fast ones. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. The next one is, and it's really a modification for our 1109.2. This one is really a proposal to modify how we look at, we have currently in the code one performance path, which is sort of a full-scale energy modeling path. It aligns with what's in the IECC for code, but there's a proposal, again, PP 22, about really the comparison table. We had done a little work on this, but would like to invite the proponent up to discuss their proposal. This is PP 22. Oh, it's 23? On 20, and it's number 23 on the website.
Which is the ERI path.
This one will be about energy modeling and some base energy. So what you're comparing when you're doing an energy model, you have what's quote code minimum, and then what you can take credit for in your energy model when you're looking at your design. So I'll let the proponent begin on this and go through.
Morning again, Steve Strawn from JELD-WEN Windows and Doors. Just a real quick modification to the table to sort of bring it in line with what's been in the IECC for better part of a decade, a little more than a decade, I think, in their table R405.4.2 parent 1. And all we're doing is is adding in a row for window orientation. As you can see, it's basically the baseline is that the windows are equally distributed to all four cardinal compass orientations, north, east, south, and west, and then the proposed building as designed. So it's really just adding in that option for the window orientation. No additional cost. It's just an option that could be used in this comparison table.
Thanks, Steve. To the committee?
We'll try and bring up the language to show it on the screen, just so everyone can have a quick look at that.
Mark, this is Rex. So the bottom of your analysis, your last line there in italics is, this proposal is not necessary if NA 1109 is removed. Can you talk about that?
So if there's another proposal coming later that would suggest, that would ask to remove this energy modeling path. So one of the, currently have one performance path. They're looking at having just one separate performance path. So would like to get, if this remains, and just letting people know that there may be a proposal for your consideration later, but getting
We
the
could vote in
energy
favor of
modeling.
this, but it could get trumped
It
later.
could get
Assuming that
Trump
the
later,
other
yeah.
proposal were
Yeah.
approved, then this would go away and it wouldn't really make any difference.
Gotcha.
But in this case, it's just simply adding it in case that N1109 survives.
Thumbs up on that. Okay. Any questions?
Well, is this an easy enough addition to look at, or should we look at the other proposals that may trump it first?
This is a fairly easy one, that if there is an energy modeling path, which is this is aligning with the IECC residential code. They have a modeling path similar to this. Our comparison table hasn't been updated in some time because it's not something that's used very often. And this go round, we're seeing where model code has sort of changed there's a proposal to catch up with sort of making sure we have the right references to be able to take advantage of if your design is looking at shading devices and the like, that you can look at passive solar, and does your model can you take advantage of that in your code, in your modeling? And that's just getting our comparison table more caught up with what's in the model code level.
I don't have an issue with this.
Seems like a good update.
Effectively, what you're doing is allowing some other methods to comply with the code, and this is just just allowing that if the builder wants to take advantage of that.
Any other questions from the group? We have a general okay on this one, so we can move to the meat of the day. So now let's move to, and I'm looking at our order was to go back to PP7, correct? Is it numbered differently on the other one, Laura? That from your review matrix, PP7, Kevin Rose from NEEA. And trying to find my worksheet on this. You'll have to forgive me here. Okay, I found my right one. So I'm going to bring this up. It is for a request that table N, or the requirements for additional measures, go from one additional measure to two. If this went, it also would require that if you were going with the exception for ducts outside, that would then require three measures. So if the proponent would like to go through this, I think it's time for in-depth discussion now. Thank you. Are you available, Kevin?
Sorry, I had made this window small and then I couldn't find it again for a little bit. Apologies for wasting a few moments there. Yeah, so there are as was advertised, two similar proposals here. As we'll do this one first, and then the more structurally impactful one, which would be the other proposal, which I guess is coming up next. So if we were going to do something with these two proposals, they wouldn't really work together. We kind of have to choose one or the other. So just to advertise that ahead of time, or we'd have to find some way to harmonize them. But yeah, the concept here is to go from, well, regardless of what code path you're currently taking, to require one more code path, one more additional package than would currently be required. So a couple of reasons for doing this. Always best to start with it's cost effective. We had it at, if I remember correctly, about an 11-year payback. I'll check my proposal on that. That simple payback, and that's, you know, very much within the ballpark of what we were seeing, like a 10 or so year payback. In terms of BCD's analysis of where the code stands now. Maybe mine was a little higher than that, and I'm mixing up my numbers here. I'll take another look at that, but not too different from where we're currently at is the point that I'm trying to make here. Right. So cost effective. And certainly within the measure life of the measure that you would choose for this additional package. In terms of our analysis, we assumed, as BCD did in their inputs and assumptions for their modeling, that the package number one, that the furnace was sort of the default option. And then we assumed for this proposal that the advanced water heating package would be the proposal that's selected. So in homes that are using gas for heating, we assumed a gas water heater, and correspondingly, we assumed electric in electrically heated homes, and followed the same weighting that BCD provided in their inputs and assumptions spreadsheet to crunch our numbers. So cost effective is number one. So number two, you know, this, like any other efficiency measure, we're talking about DOE zero energy ready home equivalents as a minimum. So there is no need to stop there. And I would really appreciate the opportunity to dig in more into these numbers that we were just presented at the beginning of this meeting. But I believe that one thing you can see out of the table that that was shared is that there are scenarios per BCD's modeling where the modeled 2023 draft is less efficient than the target. So another way of saying that is it depends on how you weight the different scenarios that BCD modeled as to whether that number clocks in at that magic number. So that's true with any modeling. There are assumptions that you have to make in judgment that has to be made, and that doesn't mean that we can ever get away from that. But I just wanted to highlight that it's worth assessing the risk and, you know, potential error bars around this analysis, so that we have a sense of our statistical level of confidence in having met the executive order. I know that a lot of folks were citing the fact that BCD's measured that we've achieved that in their reason for voting it the way that they did. So I just wanted to highlight that. Again, I think we do well with more opportunity to dig into those numbers, but I just wanted to highlight that another reason to potentially vote for or approve this particular code measure is that it really helps to get at some of that uncertainty, shrink some of those error bars, say with more certainty that we've actually met that that minimum standard per the executive order. You know, not just from the efficiency advocate standpoint, is that a good idea? It was already mentioned that there's going to be the $5,000 available for homes that meet zero energy ready home equivalents. So I would think, as builders who are watching this process, seeing that we're very carefully going through the code and meeting the executive order, that we're at least achieving zero energy ready home equivalents, I think those builders are saying, okay, great, they've done the hard work. I can bank on that $5,000. Maybe in some exceptional cases, if I do everything right, I should be able to bank on that and fold that into my business model and my business planning. I think we want to minimize, to the extent reasonable, the risk that they don't get to that level of, depending on the different options that they make and the different exceptions that they take in the code. I think we would do well to make it more certain that they will actually be able to claim those $5,000 credits at the end of the day. Because right now, I think there is some risk, some reasonable risk that that's not going to be the case for some builders, and I just think that would be an unfortunate outcome of this, where we could really be aligning with the dollars that are becoming available. So yeah, so we've talked about 2 points already: that this is cost effective, period, and that this helps increase the or decrease the risk that we don't make the minimum target, which is good for both this group as well as for the builders who want to bank on that $5,000. The final point is, if you're going to look at all sorts of different paths to efficiency to increase efficiency, isn't this the one that we can most agree on? This one provides, compared to, you'll remember last week me talking about requiring performance testing in certain values. Going through the options table provides the builders with the most options to be able to do this. So it should reward the most flexibility, come at the least cost, because builders will choose the things that they can get the best price for and have the best solutions to implement. So this, to me, seems like a cost-effective thing that's a good idea to do, and provides projects with the most flexibility to achieve. So that's my pitch.
And from just a quick reminder about the, so if people are looking to go to get the either Energy Star or ZERH money, we did look at so you need that output from REM rate that shows ZERH compliance. And the point of this is not actually going into the minor details or arguing over small inputs. We checked with Ryan Mears from actually from the people who run the REM rate program. They said, yes, what we have is the what is in the REM rate program now. It will show whether or not you're compliant with actually version 0.7 of the Zero Energy Ready Home program. And that also, when we discussed earlier with Sam Rashkin and Eric Werling of DOE about the Zero Energy Ready Home program, if you take the 2023 code and put it in, you can get a ZERH ready home. Now, yes, there may be one home out there in one design that might not get all the way 100% to ZERH compliant, but will definitely make it for Energy Star money. Is that this gets you, just to clarify, yeah, the 99 out of 100 conditions, probably you will be able to get we haven't found one yet of our 64 home prototypes, all of them met the ZRH. We ran them all of what we have. But again, there could be an oddball out there that might not, and they might at that point need to do an additional, but the 2023 is meeting, yes, and I do recognize, and ask for maybe wanting to go a little, to have that extra degree of certainty, but based on current division analysis, yes, we have made that minimum. And I think just wanted to clarify that, yes, if you use this, you will, if you were building the homes that we have as our prototypes of the 64, you could be in the ZRH program without anything else. So.
Marcus Rex, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we have two other proposals that are similar or sort of competing with this, or should we be hearing all of those and then circling back to this? I don't quite know what to do with this right now.
At the discretion of the committee, if you'd like to hear the other proposals as well. So that we have another proposal asking to use what's in the, and those are PPs 23 and 24, looking at, there's a compliance path for essentially using run rate reports to comply, a co-compliance path they call the Energy Rating Index, which is essentially a HERS rating, I believe is the easiest way to translate that, is looking at having that as a alternate compliance path for flexibility, so that the report that you get when you're doing a HERS rating can tell you whether or not you comply. That's model code methodology. And then there's another one, proposal number PP 27, that is looking at, which might be one we want to look at now, since it's not an alternate path. We could look at that at the same time about instead of using the additionals measures table, looking at moving to the credit system that is in the model code, the IECC residential. So they use a points-based system where instead of just picking one item or picking two items, they have a more extensive menu that varies the number of credits you get for each measure. So if you'd like, we could ask for that or annex the proponent as well, if they'd like to maybe consider those two, whether it's the current table or looking at an alternate to the current additional measures table.
And Mark, it's my understanding that the ERI path would be an additional path, not in competition with the current path, right?
That is correct. So it would need to, you set a target based on, regardless, for alternate paths, you try and make that target match what the prescriptive code is, yes. So,
yeah.
But that would.
In other words, there's no competition between that and the proposal up before us.
Yeah, so I would look, say 27 and as well, if people are interested in that. Thank you. And Kevin, at our last meeting, you had suggested that as well, that you maybe wanted to look at it at the same time. Are you open to that as well?
Yeah, it would be a shame to go down one road completely and then just decide we were going to do something completely different. So I'd be open to that.
I support that.
Okay.
Yeah, it works for me.
That works for me too.
For those of you following at home, we are bringing up also creating a path that aligns with the 2021 IECC using the credits that they developed for their process. PP 27, I'm trying to find in my and while I'm looking for this, representing, I think New Buildings and it's going to be, is it Ben who will be presenting, or?
Mark Lyles is here from MBI to present this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to take it away?
Go ahead. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the committee for considering this proposal. I was a little bit late to this meeting, so I'm not sure what all has been discussed in the lead up to this proposal. I know that Kevin just sounds like presented the one that he worked on with NEEA, which was kind of more in the vein of how the current code is structured here in Oregon, which is really reliant on selecting a number or selecting from packages. What this proposal does is it goes from the package approach to creating a number of discrete measures that are calibrated to the energy savings, and it requires homes to get a certain number of credits in total that can be selected from that table to meet a certain number of total points at the end of the day that is equivalent to a certain percentage of energy savings. So I can see, thanks for having the proposal up here on the screen. The proposal moves this section to a new section at the end of the code. If you want to just scroll down there, why don't I just kind of talk through the table here? Perfect. So as I previously mentioned, instead of having a series of packages with various degrees of savings associated with them, this proposal requires homes to select a total of 10 credits from this table. And this gives builders a great degree of flexibility to select from this table the options that make the most sense for their projects. So there's envelope options, there's equipment options for both space conditioning and hot water heating. If you scroll down a little bit more, you can see there's lower air leakage rate plus HRV, ERVs. There's an appliance option and there's a renewable energy option. And then you can see for the different climate zones what those values are associated with. What this, in addition, this proposal would require that projects or homes select any two measures from this table that would equate to 10 credits in total. So you cannot satisfy the section of the code by just selecting one. You'd have to go with two at a minimum, in addition to getting the 10 credits. And that roughly equates to about a 10% energy savings. We have been in discussions with BCD about setting that total threshold for the credits that would need to be achieved to basically whatever they did in terms of their final determination, that if there was any calibration that would need to be done in order to make sure that that total number of credits that was being set needed to be higher or lower in order to meet their goal, then that would be accomplished at that time. So that is kind of the high level overview of this proposal. And as you can see here, there's a number of, in terms of the efficiencies, it's generally in line with what was existing in the previous code, but really, like I said, the main move here is to break it out and then to assign individual credits with each of the measures to better calibrate the savings.
Quick question, in the proposal original language, I'm seeing a 20 credit minimum. I think you just mentioned 10.
Right.
Is that?
I apologize for that. We are working at the model code level at the national with the IECC to get a similar proposal in. I think that was mentioned by somebody, and that one was 10. And this one, based on the analysis that was done by NEEA, we determined that it would need to be 20 credits to meet the goal that we had identified initially going into this proposal. But as I mentioned, it sounds like we are open to working with BCD to make sure that whatever that total value is the correct value based on their final determination.
This is Rex Turner. I think maybe in that you answered my question. I'm going to ask it in a different way just to make sure. So is this the path, the direction that our international code is taking currently, or is this leading edge stuff that we'd be doing in Oregon first?
This is the direction that the IECC code is going in. So the public comment draft of the IECC 2024, it was just published yesterday, I believe. And a very similar proposal to this proposal is in that public comment draft. So we are anticipating that something that looks very similar to this will be published in the IECC 2024.
Again, this isn't my field of expertise, but this is kind of a major shift, Mark, in the way we're currently or have been doing this for a while. I guess I'm worried about the risk of being, as I said, bleeding edge. And it sounds like from your analysis, your summary that you provided us, there really wasn't the cost impact information that is required from the OIR that is currently in effect for reviewing proposals.
Thank you, Rex. Mark Heiser with the division. In our analysis, we just looked at, based upon the state of Washington has something similar. They do credits and points, and they've looked at relative to their baseline code and this proposal, and the credits are, in our analysis, really it's looking at the effect relative to the IECC baseline prescriptive code path. So for us, it would take on this go round, it would take some pretty extensive modeling and a bit of time to come up with potentially proposed points that would go to the board. And for us, we really can't note about something like energy efficient appliances going with Energy Star appliances. That's one of them, one of those things that's sort of out of our scope for regulating those, or being able to see that the appliances are actually there at time of final inspection. And looking to the group here, there's, coming up with a number would take some time, and then seeing whether or not, then cross-referencing and seeing whether it comes out as a ZERH home, going through the different prototype homes. It will take us some time. And just noting that there's also a measure for putting in renewable energy, getting credit for solar. And I know there's that would be something to get, not knowing how many points we get and knowing the cost effectiveness of really going through these and doing analysis.
Well, this is Rex again. It just feels to me like we really don't have enough information to move forward with this. I guess I'm leaning toward not being in favor of it at this time. Might be a little early, maybe in the next code cycle.
Well, I'll let Mark go ahead, but I wanted a clarification.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that I failed to mention this in my discussion of the proposal, that the analysis, the credit values that are being assigned to each one of these measures, that modeling was done by the Pacific Northwest National Labs. So as Mark Heiser alluded to, using the IECC prototype home, but that analysis was done by the national lab. So a high degree of stringency in that analysis, and the lab has significant technical chops in doing that determination.
Yeah, yes, and that is true that they did it based on all climate zone 4s. So the issue for us in doing the review, just to look at, and to bring to people's attention, is sort of the difference between what's in Washington. There's some differences between Washington and Oregon. Something similar was brought the last time, and there had been, just to give some history on this for points proposals, was they looked at what was done in Washington, but the points changed to try and find a regional number would be very good, that's based upon what we have for bare minimum, for our minimum non-additional measures. To get to that, we couldn't say with certainty where things are going currently, and then we'd still have to come up with what is that minimum number of points to meet the quote ZERH minimum target. It can be done, but it may take an extensive amount of time.
Any comments? This is Rex again. Any comments from our plan review world out there and how this would impact your?
Definitely. I know
Huge.
there's a few hands up though. If they want to speak first, that's fine, but I definitely have some thoughts on it.
Go ahead, Karen.
I think
Just in the, permitting aspect and enforcement, getting people to understand, an application, what they're selecting and would be pretty complex. And then I know we find in the field, even with our current additional energy measures, that it's often that out at inspection, when our inspectors are checking that they've met the energy measure they've selected, half the time, maybe not half the time, but it's pretty often that they either, ordered the wrong product or didn't get the furnace that they had marked that they were going to, and then they're scrambling to, select a different measure. I can't imagine having to, if they've selected 4 or 5 things, seeing that all the way through to the finish, that each of those get met, I think would be pretty complex.
Kevin? Rose, hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on this one. One, to some of the thoughts about that were just raised about like enforceability and complexity and things. In a code cycle where almost nothing wasn't contentious in the 2024 IECC, this proposal that, as Mark Lyles mentions, is very similar to what's going in for the 2024 IECC. That one went through with almost no resistance, and that of course includes industry and code officials and a whole mess of folks. So granted, that's a across the country view, not a Oregon specific view, but there was at least the feeling amongst that group that the pros of this approach outweigh the cons of sticking with a package-based approach. A couple other quick hits that I wanted to mention. Mark Heiser has been mentioning Washington's similar approach. I just wanted to take the opportunity to underscore again that this is a pretty different approach from what Washington does, which includes a whole carbon equivalence thing, and just wanted to properly represent that none of that is happening here, and the analysis that was done that underlies the 2024 IECC proposal that this proposal before us here comes from is not Washington based. It was done by PNNL for the 2024 IECC. So for the folks who are thinking like, oh, I know what they have in Washington and I don't want that, I just wanted to clarify that that's not what we're talking about here. A couple other quick items. Another one of the benefits that hasn't been mentioned yet. I'll name a couple of the quick ones of this compared to my own proposal. Just more options, period, for builders and designs to choose from, which seems like a good idea, as well as the fact that because of the PNNL modeling, which again we might have to chew up a little bit for Oregon specifically, those different options have been calibrated to be how many points of credit you're actually getting, and it actually accurately reflects simulated energy performance. Based on analysis that was done by NEEA before my tenure there, and I think is common knowledge by others, the current set of additional efficiency measures are not all even. So that only complicates things like when we're trying to assess equivalence with zero energy ready homes or any other standard in the future. We have to make assumptions about different measures that are being selected, and those measures aren't equivalent, and so they provide different outcomes. So that's just a complication that we could maybe get out from under by moving to this sort of approach where there is an intentional balancing of the different measures so that we're getting to more similar outcomes project to project compared to the current system. Very last point I'll touch on, sorry, I'm skipping around a lot of things. The items about a couple of the measures in the table specifically were mentioned, the renewables piece, as well as the appliances piece. If those are areas that folks feel that we just don't want to get into or are not within the scope of code, if we just eliminated those, we would still have more options than we currently do under the efficiency package options at present. So if folks have, concern about those, we would still come out ahead in terms of total options available if we got rid of them. That's it for me. And Mark, I see you want to jump in.
No, I was just giving a thumbs up to that point.
Sorry,
So,
Mark Heiser.
To see the next one, let's see here, who was up first, David or Jonathan? Jonathan Balkema first.
I think I'm going to end up going full circle on I like elements, I don't like elements, blah, 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 blah. So I apologize there. But the reality of it is I agree that from a jurisdictional standpoint and enforcement standpoint, that much variety, it will be challenging just for an enforcement action because we struggle, honestly, when we were 2 items to get people to select 2 items, we struggle well with 1 item. So there's going to be challenges in that situation. Obviously, that's part of what our role is, to help walk people through what you need to do on the intake side and then the inspection side. So we can obviously get there at some point, but the reality is there's going to be some challenge there, especially with the large variety. The part that I like is obviously the large variety. That part's nice. Back when we did do the 2011 code with NEEA, one of the challenges we found while setting that up is we actually looked at this type of a model, and I don't know if date wise was at the same time Washington was going or Washington just adopted it, but the reality was when we were starting to put packages together to meet the, I think it was Senate Bill 71, can't remember which Senate bill we were trying to meet in the 10%, we were struggling to get modeling to where we could guarantee every one of the packages would combine to meet that minimum 10% threshold that the legislature put in. So because sadly, and hopefully they resolved it in their point system, but at least at that point in time when we looked at that, it was, well, if you put this measure with this measure, sure, it meets the 10%, but that same measure with this measure didn't meet 10%. Even if the points showed it would have, it didn't physically calculate out that way. So there was some challenges in that original approach. So I would think that there would be some potential for that again here. But not saying I don't like it. One thought would be that it doesn't sound like it's ready for prime time for Oregon this time around anyway, but maybe for the 2026 code, whatever we're going to be at that point in time, maybe this, instead of becoming a wholesale swap, we allow it as a do our existing tables or do this and then let the industry slowly shift over to it, knowing that that's going to be the way it will be going forward. So that way we have basically a 2 code cycle switch over to it. So anyway, the idea, support the additional options. I think it doesn't sound like it's prime time for us yet.
Okay, David Heslam was next, I believe.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks, committee members. This isn't my proposal, but I'm very familiar with options tables, because we run above code programs and administer above code programs, which basically use all these types of select something, you get points, and you need so many points, to get your gold, silver, platinum certification. So having lots of experience with different point systems and modeling, I'll just say, there's nothing that's perfect. And in our current options table we have in our code has things that don't make it perfect, right? Like for different types of houses and different fuels, one bundle versus another in our current table, aren't equal. Kind of hearkening back to Jonathan's comment, that's the imperfection we currently live with. And then Carrie, the point you made about, now I can't get a product. And now I need to do something different. Like with our bundles, that can be tough. This new system is not perfect either. I think it's getting closer to being perfect than our current system, because I do think having more options is just more flexibility. And if there's one thing I knew as a builder back when I was a builder, and I keep hearing from builders, is they would like, more flexibility. So just having a longer laundry list that they can pick whatever things get them to the points they need, and knowing that some separate party established the points, some separate respected party ascribed the points, in this case PNNL for this analysis, I mean, should give everybody involved some comfort, I think. But if somebody can't find a certain product and they can't get their 4 points or 5 points product, I think administratively, and I know I'm not a code official, but we run above code programs. Administratively, it is pretty straightforward to have somebody exchange one 5-point measure for another 5-point measure, or 2 for 2, or whatever that would be. And I think the way, and I'm not sure other people know better than me, but I think the way, again, administratively, this has been handled in Washington jurisdictions is basically making a checklist that gets as part of the documentation that's submitted up front. And then that's the documentation that goes with the packet ongoing for verification. And so that there's been some, and that I would assume in Oregon would be something developed by BCD for this. So as an outsider, not on the committee, but I would actually suggest, and Jonathan, you may have been saying this, that this does get added as another option, knowing that this is where the IECC is headed. And I do think builders would be very supportive of it because of the greater flexibility. And I do think there's ways to help with the potential administrative burden through checklists. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Was it Kevin Duell first?
I'll let Elizabeth go first, actually.
Are you sure, Kevin?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I appreciate what David said, and of course, Carrie, and coming from a code official's perspective and trying to enforce this and regulate it, it is quite a challenge. And I am just thinking out loud, don't freak out, but like some of us are like, do we add another cost for an energy efficiency review because things are getting so complex? I think that it could be organized. I actually do like it, and I like that there is flexibility, but the way that it's presented in this proposal, like we want to make sure something is easy to change down the road, because like Carrie pointed out, what happens is they're out in the field, they can't get something, and so now they're changing their measures, right? And so now if we're having a point system and you need 25 points, you need to kind of organize it like, okay, you have to, if you're changing this 5-point thing, it has to be for another 5-point thing. So it has to be from this list. So this seems very confusing to me, the way that it's laid out right now. And I just wanted to throw that out there. I like what Jonathan said about, I don't want to keep kicking the can down the road where it's going to be even further of a leap to go from what we have to like the 2026. So if this was an option and we sort of do that soft layout to sort of start leading people, and those builders who are already doing a lot of these way above minimum measures can start to choose those. So those are my thoughts.
Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It refreshed me here, Mark. It's my understanding that the Oregon process is usually to look at the current Oregon code, then look at the current IECC code, and then integrate those elements and proceed from there. Is that correct?
For the ORSC, it's all Oregon currently. So
Well, I just mean historically that
a-
we typically adopt the current IECC as it has been. The IEC gets adopted, and then we adopt that and then modify from there, essentially, right?
Or Chapter 11, no. We've been sort of homegrown for a while, but as it's been noted, there appears to be interest in a change and maybe trying to find out how it would align with what's been proposed, maybe consideration of, yes, maybe a statewide alternate method at some point when this can be looked at in a little more detail to get things aligned. Maybe have a path for people to try and look at this and see how it float the balloon maybe at some point. But
I gotcha. I guess what I was driving at is that this would put us, because this will be adopted and put into place next year, right? So this would put us neck and neck with the IECC essentially.
we would have to look at side by side, which was something we do later afterwards to make our declaration to the feds that we met or exceeded the latest model code. So it's not a apples to apples based on some of the things that we have in our prescriptive code, like the ducks inside and a few other pieces that are in.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Take a little bit more investigation.
And my experience with Washington codes, and I know this isn't equivalent to Washington's process, but just the notion of having a credits table with many options. I mean, I think we're looking at 23 here. Is that to comply with Washington code, builders have to have an external resource, and in this case, that is Better Bricks Northwest. They've created a spreadsheet that walks you through the credits table. They've put on classes, and for myself, just understand how to craft a building that meets the requirements of those credits. You need that external resource. You have to go through a process of what does it cost and what are the implications and how do these things interact. So it is a level of flexibility, but it's also a level of complexity. And one thing that Oregon code has for it is its simplicity. And yeah, there's 7 measures or whatever, 7 packages, but that's part of the beauty of it, right? Is you have a limited set of choices. I know that flexibility sounds good, but have you ever, I don't buy wine ever, very rarely. So when I go to a wine shop and I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I have no clue. There's an actual phenomenon in neuroscience called choice paralysis.
Yes.
That beyond about 3 things, we kind of shut down and we need help. We need a curator to help us through the process. And I know we also have been trained to think, oh, flexibility is great, choice is great, but there's books on this. That at some point it's actually makes your thinking much more complex, and you have to stop what you're doing and really dig in. And that's as a builder's perspective. I'm not a builder, but I'm a designer. So I have to think like a builder sometimes. That being said, yeah, it certainly provides options, and I agree there's issues with our current process, and that there is no perfect way. This does seem like a leap from our current state rather than a step. I guess I'd like to see this hashed out in the IECC first, give that some time to percolate through the industry. Okay. And perhaps this would belong better in a reach code, maybe, right. As something to socialize the market. And yeah, I think that's it for the moment. Thank you.
We'll try and avoid the national code level, the Me Too's, and try and get some fresh. And it looks like we'll do David, Natalie, and then Ty. Yeah, David, are you still looking to discuss.
I'll lower my hand for now, 'cause let other folks get a voice in. Thank you.
Natalie?
I've heard it from a few people about giving this as an option. Can we provide this as an alternative in this code cycle, or would it need to wait until the future adoption? And that's for you, Mark, I guess.
To develop good numbers and potentially align and maybe see a path that would, once a few of the points potentially may leave from the table, actually being able to have, enough remaining. So this is already chopped out of the points for ducks inside. Maybe as a development for, say, something like a statewide alternate method in the future, to try and get it out there or starting with it as seeing where it lines up as a reach code, but to get this done and in front of the committee, it might be a little difficult as to come up with something that we know would be confident in. It's might be possible in the next couple months, but it's an idea that we know that is definitely showing interest, but how we make this work. So we had Ty next.
Yeah, my name's Ty Jennings, and I just want to introduce a perspective. While I acknowledge this is not the same as what Washington has done, it is very similar in a lot of ways. As a plans examiner in Washington, one of my struggles was the many different options that were available. And that always complicated plan review. And I'll just point out that my plan reviews of energy code probably doubled or tripled in length of time that I had to spend on a house, to the point where I was spending almost half my time just doing energy code review. And that was because of the diverse number of options, collecting that information from the builders, verifying that we had all the details necessary to see how they were proposing to comply with the options. Oregon's code is beautiful in its simplicity. And I really think that that is something that needs to be valued and kind of protected in some way. So that's just my comment. I just wanted to share that the comments provided by others that highlight some of the complexity that comes with more options really is a factor that needs to be considered. And I saw it happen in Washington.
And Ty, as a non-committee member, could you please identify your association, please?
Yeah, I'm with Cascade Natural Gas, but I just wanted to provide that on my own personal history, not related with my current employer, but personal testimony from my experience in prior work.
We had a hand in the room first and then Elizabeth next, but Rex?
Yeah, this is Rex Turner again. I just want to remind everybody that we're on a 2-year code cycle right here, and even minor changes that require new training to be developed. It impacts the plan reviewers, and obviously it impacts the builders. We all have to learn the new way. This is a huge shift. It's going to require a lot of training and resources from all three of those sides of the, I guess, the triangle. I won't be supporting it right now, but one thing that we could do as a committee is make our recommendation to the residential board to direct staff to look at this as a statewide alternate method, and as some people suggested, maybe that eases us into this in the future.
Elizabeth?
Thank you. Yes, it is interesting. I appreciate what Kevin Duell said about being overwhelmed by the choices. I used to call it the bead store complex. Like, I go into a bead store to make a necklace and it's like, oh my God, I don't know what to pick. And I appreciate this sort of a la carte kind of choice versus but also I feel like we all like a meal plan where it's sort of done kind of for us. And that is the beauty of what we've got in the existing additional measures table. Another thought is, could we do an equivalent credits? Like, okay, we have our additional measures, and could there be credit that is equivalent to a lot of these more a la carte items too, and maybe kind of merge that a little bit. Thanks.
Any other hands up?
I just think Rex has a good point of us being on just a 2-year code cycle, and there was quite a few code changes last cycle that really took some training of staff and of contractors, and we're still getting there. They still, whole house ventilation is still, they're trying to figure that out a year into it for contractors. But so, and then just a lot of what I said last week too, that I think that the more complex the code gets, I think we should keep it as simple as possible. I guess I would be curious how many builders would be interested in this, even having this as an option, before the division spends a lot of time making it a statewide alternate method. I'd be curious if there's builders wanting that. Do we have builders here that have any comments?
I will do Rex and then see if Jamin has a comment.
Yeah, I don't know if Jamin's ready to comment on it or not, but I would just say at the residential board, I think there are more builders on that board that may, again, take another look at this, get another bite of the apple, basically, at this board level. And maybe their direction is to explore this, have staff explore this further as an option.
I apologize. I'm working in my home office, and my son just walked in here and asked me something as she was asking me that question, so I kind of missed the question.
There was just a general question whether the builders in the room had interest in further discussion or looking at something that has more diversified point menu versus a limited number of measures, and just looking for that. And then we'll go to Adelaide next. Anything from you though, Jamin?
I'm all for options. I mean, the more flexibility, the better in most cases. Like we've had discussions about doing a HERS rating or different options. So I'm not opposed to having additional options on the table, but at the end of the day, some of this stuff just becomes more complicated than it's worth. Like, there's value in having some basic guidelines and sticking to them. So, it's just kind of, it just gets it gets more confusing than what it's worth at times, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a couple other quick comments, and then we need to wrap this up because we're at lunch, and then we'll come back and finish up. Adelaide?
My only comment in this, and I too wouldn't be supportive of this at this time as it moving into the code, but we border states that primarily use the IECC. So I know I routinely accept alternates out of the IECC, which works great in lieu of just waiving them. At least we're getting some model code energy compliance. But I do see the points thing coming in at a national level, and even why Oregon takes its time to provide training. I would appreciate it if we got training out to builders on these requirements. All of our builders are members of the Portland Contractors Association. So I agree that we need just training on getting to whole house ventilation before we move on. But again, this is something, if it comes forward, a building official could accept as an alternate if needed.
Thank you. And we'll wrap up. David, any new?
Yep. Thank you, Mark, and committee members. And Adele, I'll just say, Kevin's team over at NEEA has a lot of educational resources for builders on these topics, whether it's the code or above code. So Kevin would be a great resource for that, and the online stuff mostly. But what I wanted to follow up on was in regards to the builder point of view, because 2 code cycles ago, leading up to that code cycle, I did participate in a working group with folks from the HBA. I mean, we met for, it was over a year trying to come up with joint code proposals. And at the end of the day, for that cycle, 2 cycles ago, the Oregon Home Builder Association had a proposal that converted the options table to a points-based system. And NEEA had a proposal that would have converted our current options table to a points-based system. They were not exactly the same proposals. They were very similar. And I can just tell you from the many, many meetings that we participated in leading up to those 2 proposals being created, part of it was the builders felt, and this is what I heard, the builders say was that this seemed like a way that they could forecast and test new things, because the feeling was, hey, in the future, the base code would probably stay the same, but you might require another point or 2 points, depending on what your scale is, right? 3 years later. And so in that interim 3 years, they could play with their plans a little bit and say, what if I try this other measure that gets me an extra point now, right? Without having to go to a whole bundle of things. It was easier for them to test out a change in the lead up. And they kind of all knew, well, next go round, they're going to make me do something more. And it's going to be from this list of stuff. And the other thing was having it broken out into individual things. The concept was it would be easier when some new technology comes in that saves a little more energy, you could add that to the list or change it from 2 points to 3 points because it's a newer, better version of itself. But that was the thinking that went on and lots of discussion happened. I just wanted to let everybody know 6 years ago or 7 years ago, whenever that was, there were 2 proposals around having these points or credits be associated with the options table. One came from the Oregon Home Builder Association. One came from NEEA. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've hit 12. Do you want to take a break and come back and do discussion, or take another 10 minutes on this and just discuss well, first off, so you sort of have 2 things about additional measures in front of you right now. Currently, we've been concentrating on the points one first, and just really out to everyone on that, whether we want to close this one out right now or whether you want to. Rex?
I think we could move forward with a decision now. Personally, I'm voting no on it, but with the caveat that I think the committee should recommend to the board that they look at this either for the next code cycle. I think the future is clear. This is where it's going, or as a statewide alternate method, and debate that at the board level, whether they want to make that, a direction to staff.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I support Rex's idea.
I concur.
I agree as well.
I am a no for this at this time, which I think is what Rex was saying.
I'm a no as well, although I get that we were going here anyhow. So if there was another way we could do it, I'd consider it, but no for now.
And a quick question about making it an alternate method. Would it be this proposal that's the alternate method, or something like it?
That would be something the division would look at and probably discuss with builders and the advocates who have done it, probably an outreach to Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, who did the research on the current points. Of course, we have people who've seen what happened, look at what was available in Washington, and then sort of spending some time to come up with a system that would be equivalent to what's currently in the code. And then that would be if we were looking for something in the interim, if it's looking like that's a no, or beginning the process right now of looking to the advocates and the home builders to see what the target would be for 2024 for the 2026 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. So there's plenty of opportunity to discuss separately.
Good deal. Thank you.
Okay, so looks like disapprove on that one. Got a couple more, but looks like lunchtime.
We can take a break, but then we can come back to NEEA's proposal for two, which one is that? PPO or 7, I believe. I'm trying to remember my numbers. Yes, PP7, we can come back and work on that one again. And then the two proposals that came in for looking at a energy rating path. And then we can probably wrap this up. So 45 minutes, everyone. Is that acceptable?
Go to 1.
Sounds great.
1 o'clock.
1
We'll see
o'clock.
everybody at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's back. Okay, recording in progress. Okay, here we go. Now everybody's back. Good to go. So we left off, I think you counting everybody there? We got numbers?
I'm trying to count again. Thank you. So.
They're bouncing around.
Yeah.
Hold still. Jeez. I don't know, somehow they moved the boxes.
7, 8.
Jonathan's camouflaged. I can't see him.
8,
I'm
9.
just being green, man.
We have 9.
It's not easy, according to Kermit. Okay, looks like we're there. Happy fun time's over. Back to codes. So we left off with Kevin's proposal that you heard earlier. He gave us a synopsis, and then we jumped to the other proposal. So that puts us back to that. So, and I don't know what the P number is on that one.
7.
P7 or PP7. So we'll just kick it back. I'll kick it over to Mark and kick it back to there. Actually kick it to the committee for deliberation.
Yeah. At this point, I'd like to, ask if there's further questions or deliberation or what people would like to discuss. And let me look and see anyone wishing to raise hands at this point. Or
I'll kick it off, Mark. This is Rex Turner again. So going back through your proposal summary, I underlined a couple things just now. Well, first of all, the comment was made that it's cost effective with an 11-year payback. That's not necessarily my definition, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. But under your cost analysis, you had checked no, not provided, and then I underlined compliance with the lowest cost additional measure. No other measure combinations are analyzed. Could you elaborate on that?
This was just the staff analysis was just looking at what the effect is when they look at there's an analysis of adding one additional measure to up the number from 1 measure to 2, but there is also and that cost analysis based on adding the lowest cost or one of the lower cost ones, which is the water heater measure number 2, but whether or not there was any additional look at what happens when the ducts inside goes from 2 to 3. We're just trying to see what would be the additional cost impact to go to that next one. Was just the one piece that we were looking to get a little more on so that people would know, because the lowest cost measure won't be done twice. So what that effect is as we add 3 for the ducts inside people.
Sorry, again, to dumb it down for me, would that possibly change the 11-year payback to a longer time frame then, or by oversimplifying it?
I can't give an absolute yes or no without seeing, how what measures were selected for that third one and how cost effective they are, and what that cost is, and then how much energy is saved on those. So that was one thing just would want to take a quick look at. And that was the piece that we were looking for.
I think my question is related, and it was about, so earlier I felt like I was hearing Kevin, you say that there was a cost savings, and then I was hearing Mark say, we don't know that there's a cost savings. And so I was trying to, I don't know, see who was right, but maybe from what I'm hearing now, it's about, it could be all over the place depending on what additional measures are chosen. Is that accurate?
And to clarify from a division perspective, the review and analysis of just adding one addition, the one additional member met the one additional measure that they noted. That is a, well, it met the criteria for looking at that measure. It's just that there was an additional piece that a large percentage of homes would be still with the ducts deeply buried in the attic. So that those homes would go from 2 measures to 3 measures, and it's seeing how much that affects the overall energy savings and the overall cost. Because once we'll all pick the lowest cost one first, the second we're going to pick something else that's cost effective for us. But then once we get to 3 measures, it's just looking at what that would be for those. But that's to explain it. Not that it's, we're not making a call on cost effective or not. We just don't know for that group of homes that are currently one of the bigger groups, the ones who are still deeply burying duct and attic, I guess is the.
I have a question on those numbers, and I apologize again. One of my children walked in as she was asking her question, so I missed exactly what her question was. But my question is, where does that number come from? That I believe it was like $900 and some for the fiscal impact. How was that number established? Because it doesn't, in the proposal, it doesn't give any details where that number came from. It just says they proposed that it would cost, I believe 900 and whatever it was. Where does that number come from? There's nothing stated that backs up that number, because I believe that the fiscal impact is significantly higher than what's stated in the proposal.
Should I start addressing these, or should I wait?
Yes. They're questions for proponents, so.
Okay. So first thing to hit, I did quote the wrong number earlier. I was searching for it. And I had just seen BCD's memo on where their draft was coming in on in terms of payback. And I had just seen that they had an 11 point something. For this proposal, we had a 13-year payback. So sorry for that misquote. It may not meaningfully change opinions, but I did want to accurately capture that number, and apologies for that. So now on this question of the roughly $900 incremental cost figure, and where did it come from? So in our proposal, we did model 2 cases, and this it touches a bit on the previous question as well, about different paths and why model different paths. But we assumed that the advanced space heating option was the one that was going to be picked already, aligning with BCD's assumptions in their spreadsheet that they provided on the website. And then based on our knowledge of the market, lots of information about program homes, as well as just market insights from our folks who do training and run our new construction programs and engage, it seemed reasonably clear that the vast majority of folks would be most likely to go after the water heating measure as their second measure. So that's why we only looked at the fiscals and the energy for that situation. We could have done it for more, but anyway, just wanted to explain where the numbers are coming from. And one more note on that, where we matched the water heating type to the space heating type, which historically matches assumptions made in, as far as I know, all preceding analyses of this type. So, you know, gas water heaters in gas homes, electric heat pump water heaters in those homes. So that being said, that $900 is actually I'll pull it up and get it right, a $914.20 estimated figure. That is a weighted average of the gas case and the electric case. And I just explained why we split it into two. So that is all broken out in my proposal. For the gas case, we found an incremental cost of $749.72. For the electric case, we found a higher value of $1,712.16. It comes out to 900 odd because of the weightings from the BCD inputs and assumption spreadsheet. The higher weighting of units is in gas heating, and therefore, per our assumption, gas and water heating. Yes, where the actual figures that contribute to those figures come from, we grabbed on the gas water side 2 units from the Granger catalog. And I can even pull model numbers for those if you like, but I excluded them from the proposal itself just to not provide too much. And then on the electric side, we took those from the Home Depot website. And I provided the the equipment costs so that you could do your own subtraction if you like, and retrace our steps on that one. Hopefully that was a clear enough answer to where that 900 odd incremental cost figure came from. Was that useful?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I assumed where you were basing it off of was just strictly the cost of the water heater itself. And as I said last week, there's a lot more cost involved than just the water heating unit. There's, you know, fuel supply, if it's gas, propane, trenching, gas lines. If it's a heat pump, then you have limitations on where that heat pump water heater can be placed. You can't stick it in a closet. It's got to have a certain volume of air that it has access to pull heat out of. So I feel like that $900 is a bit misleading and not a true accurate depiction of the cost to the homeowner to, you know, if this measure goes into place, it's going to cost the homeowner a lot more than $900, not just on average, but almost in every case.
I think I'll just briefly respond to that by noting that I think I heard at the beginning of this meeting, BCD provide that they took another look at this as well and came pretty close to where we came. Of course, with inflation and everything else being what it is, the numbers are changing all the time, but they, I think, independently concluded pretty closely to where we did. And I would posit that the presumption that someone would put in a propane tank just to put it in a hot water system, that doesn't strike me as the least cost or most likely. That seems, you know, I'm not a builder, but that doesn't seem like, of all the choices that are available here, of which we've just modeled one, that doesn't seem like the one that a builder in that situation or any situation I can reasonably think of would pick.
In your proposal, you stated yourself that you're using what you think is the most cost-effective additional measure of upgrading your water heating equipment, but you can't just upgrade your water heater without taking into consideration those other costs. And so you kind of said yourself that no one's going to put in a propane tank just for the water heater, but those costs have to be taken into consideration. I'm a builder, so I'm just looking at what our cost impact is to our customer. We're in an economy right now that is going into what's likely to be a hard recession. We have a lot of customers that want to build homes, but they're being priced out of them by the increased costs, interest rates, everything else. It's a really bad time to put additional costs on a homeowner when most homeowners are being priced out of their home to begin with. So I'm just trying to avoid adding thousands of dollars of additional costs to building a new home in this current market when it's so challenging to build a home already.
Jonathan? Take your hand down.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute before doing that. So as a person, I obviously support energy efficiency. So, I can appreciate the idea of the proposal. The challenge is kind of where we've talked in the past, the current state of, cost of homes, us having to have the legislature rewrite rules and, how land use is done to try to, create more housing affordability. It's challenging to add measures that are on top of what BCD is already saying is going to likely meet the goal that the executive order has already placed. And using your numbers, in the context of the potential least costly measure, interest rates look like they dipped a tiny bit today, but if you figured still interest rate was at 7%, $1,000 additional cost on the house ends up being $6.65 additional per month. So using your numbers, your savings is less than what it would end up being the additional mortgage costs, and that's over a 30-year period. So it's hard to, at the current economic state, the current just housing costs and housing affordability costs, even on rentals, to really think that we need to add an additional measure at the current moment as a minimum across all homes if what we agreed to last week, the base model that BCD put forward, would meet the executive order's goal.
I would have to agree with you there. I definitely can value and appreciate the benefits of the energy efficiency. Sorry, maybe I'm echoing. I thought someone else was talking. But I think we've got a couple of responsibilities. One is meeting the executive order, and then the other is simplifying the code and not increasing costs where we don't have to. And I agree with what's been said by Jamin and Jonathan that if we can meet the executive order as BCD's demonstrated without adding additional measures, then I don't see the value in that.
And we have,
right. I would add one other point I was going to mention, and I forgot when I was speaking, is the recovery time of 13 years for the investment. But if you look at the true cost of that additional measure is not, in my opinion, as a builder, not $914. It's more like $2,000 to $3,000, and at a cost savings of $70 a year, that's going to take about 42 years to recover that investment. Whereas the life of a water heater, in a basic Google search I did, is anywhere from 10 to 18 years. So in way shorter of a period of time than you're going to recover that investment, you're going to be buying a new water heater to replace the one that has outlived its lifespan. So fiscally, it just doesn't make sense to me.
and I want to recognize Rex in a second, but I do want to say one thing on behalf of NEEA, is that they followed the guidance that was set up before interest rates went up and before cost of energy has increased a lot. So just apologize from our standpoint, but that's that their numbers are based on using they did the right thing on it, but just want to point out that we'll need to re-examine these for next code cycle. A lot happened in a few months. Thank you.
As Rex again, yeah, I won't go over the same, but the last three speakers have basically expressed the same opinion I have. And I appreciate that the interest rate's a moving target, but I think it's moving in the wrong direction to support this proposal right now. So this will be a no for me.
Any other?
Yeah, well, I'll wait to see if there's any other comments before kind of trying to pick off things that I didn't get a chance to respond to and try saying one more thing. But anybody else?
I think it's you, Kevin. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, again, appreciated right at the top of this meeting being able to see one layer deeper into that analysis around seeing if we've in fact met the zero energy ready homes target. I'd like to follow up with that. It appears that unlike with this proposal, in one of the scenarios that DCD modeled, that they were putting in an electric heat pump water heater into every type of home, whether it's heated with gas or electric. Is that right or wrong? I see a reaction to the room. So I was trying to interpret the screenshot that I got, that would have a material impact. And at 40% of the weighting, that could be important. So I wanted to get a sense of that.
Again, the overall is looking at multiple different variations. And yes, we would be happy to discuss with NEEA for future on and go back to the many options that we're going to look at. And one of the sections is looking at heat pump. I believe it's 2B, but to let you know that if you do option 2A, you still get a zero energy. We did look at that. You'd still get a zero energy ready report. So it's still meeting the requirements to meet the equivalency of the zero energy ready program. So we can look at, yeah, would be more than happy to discuss all of the different potential weightings and things like that, which we had hoped to do before we got to this point. But in the end, they're all passing, even looking at a use of the gas water heater. It's still getting a zero energy ready report.
Okay, yeah. I think the fact that several people are citing that, you know, that it has your seal of approval that we've gotten there is sort of a key component of how they're voting. I think personally as a voter as well, I would want to have more clarity on that. Ideally, we would have had it at the start of all this, but yeah, would certainly appreciate, and I think I would guess others on the committee would as well, to better understand all the pieces of that, because you know there's a lot of assumptions underneath there, and it's good to understand it all. But yeah, at the end of it, I mean, I think we've heard a lot of similar conclusions around anything around essentially adding costs is for some stakeholders just not something that they can support right now. I get the sense that I might be fighting uphill on this one, but I would ask committee members to think about who is actually the market for people buying new construction. I think a lot of folks try to evoke images of young couples, starter families, young families, middle class, that maybe who used to buy new construction homes. I think that's a pretty low percentage of the situation now, having almost nothing to do with energy codes and lots to do with various other macroeconomic factors. And then the other piece around for those folks who do purchase the homes, of all of the costs that are going up, the energy code is essentially the only one that pays for itself. So as we're asking people to dig deeper into their pockets to buy homes, really cutting further and further into savings that they don't really have. I don't need to quote statistics to you about how close people are to, being one emergency from this and living paycheck to paycheck. Rising everything means to purchase homes, people are that much closer to being in trouble. Energy bills are one of the highest continuous costs of home ownership and one of the most volatile due to not just fuel prices themselves, but we have a increasingly unpredictable and extreme climate going forward. So there's no reason to believe that the economics for these things are only going to get better. And I think that people can have different opinions about how appropriate it is to add cost, which this would for projects that are not doing this already at the start. But at some point, isn't there a point at which saving money and the benefits that has for the people who do buy those homes outweigh that, not too tough added cost at the beginning, especially when, as mentioned up front, if there's $5,000 coming from the Fed and we're only sitting at 1,000 and something incremental cost right now, adding this measure would still put us financially in good place. So just wanted to stump once more for this. Sorry for taking a lot of airtime, but I won't say anything more on this. Thanks, guys.
I think it's a great option and that it should be up to somebody's personal preference, not something that we should require at this point. But I definitely can see the benefit to it, and people can choose to make their home more energy efficient. And hopefully, more and more projects can get the credit from the feds. But more mandates and more costs drives it even worse to where you're saying, it's not the young couple can't afford a house anymore. And by continuing to add expensive requirements, we're driving them further and further from it.
I would build on Carrie's comment that the customer can choose what they want. We offer a lot of options when it comes to heat sources, water heating. I mean, we've done geothermal heating systems. It's whatever the customer wants, we're willing to install in their home. So I agree with what Carrie said, is it should be the customer's choice what they want to pay for and what they get, not being forced upon them as a blanket rule across the board for the entire state.
All right, any further comments?
This is Adelie. I wouldn't support it at this time either. I appreciate everybody's comments, but don't want to take up the time as they are similar.
Okay. We've got one. We'll move on to the next one. Looks like, we're here, but we'll move to the ERI measures. And we had two proposals on this. This is from, let's see here. I'm getting my numbers correct. I have to find the right piece of paper for this. It is PP's, which ones? I think we have a consensus on a no. Unless someone says different at this point. All right, we're PP 2425. That's the, and if maybe we can bring it up and, this one is looking at bringing in the International Energy Conservation Code. There are two performance paths that are available. One is to do the energy modeling that we currently have in section 1109. There is a second method that's called the Energy Rating Index, which is the equivalent of a HERS rating. It normally requires software that's essentially accredited. I'm trying to remember ICC 300, there's a standard for that. You have to have a minimum standard software. We'll scroll down on this one. 2 measures putting forward, and you'll have to scroll way down on this to the very end to sort of show they have the whole code. There's a proposal to get rid of the energy mod. This is the one where from the Zero Coalition is to not have an energy modeling path, getting rid of 1109 and replacing it with the IECC ERI path, energy ERI path, essentially HERS path. And it sets a HERS number, and I'm trying to remember the differences between the two. I need to find my analyses here, but it sets a find our number here. Give me, I thought I had it ready here. Target score. Sorry, David, trying to find yours and get the right score.
Yeah, it's 53 for zone 4 and 52 for zone 5. We pulled the numbers from the reach code, the current reach code, where this is already adopted.
And then there's a second proposal from Northwest Natural Gas that has numbers that I think are reflecting appear to be reflecting the current IECC numbers.
That's correct, yeah.
The fun part about this is that the numbers flip. Their requirement is higher for different climate zones. And we, of course, general comparison I'd like everyone to sort of hear about is having an additional compliance path other than energy modeling, but would allow for some flexibility that could come with a ERI index or a HERS rating, which you could also, at the same time, if you are going this path, you could use that same HERS rating and print out a Zero Energy Ready Home certificate, and of course, or an Energy Star one, and start looking at the national incentives that are going to be available. That's the general. The proposal from the Zero Code has, I'm trying to remember if it's all the language from the IECC. I'm sorry, I don't. And then the proposal from Northwest Natural Gas is just sort of a general get a HERS rating, so, or ERI rating. So if you'd like, I'll start with David, if you'd like to give a little more background on this.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Mark. And thanks, committee members, for hearing this proposal. So yeah, Mark summed it up. What we proposed was drop that unused modeling pathway. I'm not sure it's ever been used. I don't know anybody who uses it, but it's in there, and it seems to me into the Zero Coalition, which is a group of builders, nonprofits, city governments from around the state. Sometimes, if you can get rid of stuff to make room for a new thing, that's better than just keeping on adding. So it was proposed to drop that alternate modeling pathway and then adopt the ERI pathway, which has been in the IECC and the IRC since the 2015 versions. So it's been around in model code for a while. But what we recommended here was not just adopting it, but adopting sort of the latest up-to-date language surrounding it. Because when it was first adopted in 2015, it was actually pulled from sort of the world where I live, the above code program world. Using these energy rating indexes is how, for instance, Energy Star for most of the country, it's been their yardstick for energy efficiency, right? For about 20 years now. And so it was pulled from that world into the code world. But when it got pulled in, they made a few changes at the last second, which caused it to diverge. So the ERI that went into the code for the first couple code cycles actually had a different ventilation requirement than what gets used in Energy Star and DOE's Energy Ready and most of the rest of the world above code activity. And so that actually, that nuanced element of how things get modeled caused the ERI values to really vary between what got used for Energy Star and what was getting used for code. On average, about 10 points. So actually quite a big difference. And in some cases, folks brought forward evidence that changed it by as much as 16 points. So we pulled this language from what has been proposed for the 2024 IECC and is in that same document Mark Lyles described as it came out of the consensus committee. Yay, everybody on the energy consensus committee voted for it. It's now in the draft for adoption. And so what we're proposing is to use that because that gets rid of this issue that happened with the original adoption of the ERI, where it had a different ventilation standard. So this brings it into alignment. The other language, we didn't pull in every last sentence, I think, from the IECC, Mark, but what we did try to do is create alignment with the current Oregon code. And so we refer to the Oregon table of energy efficiency required levels. You know, before we pick from the options table in Oregon, we still have to meet these basic levels of efficiency, right? This path would also require those basic levels of efficiency. And then in addition, this path says that either an individual from the jurisdiction having authority would oversee this work, or an approved third party would. And the Oregon code language already has a definition for that approved third party. So what we did is we took the reference to that approved third party and then brought it in and made it the reference within this code language to make it align with the ORSC. So in terms of making this the basis of the proposal, that's it. And then the only other thing I'd like to point out is just the alignment that Mark has mentioned in terms of alignment with the underlying certification standards that would allow you to allow a builder or a home owner to get these tax credits. It's been raised multiple times. You know, that's one thing that allowing this pathway could provide alignment with. Just again, that isn't going to make the life of any code official easier. It could potentially make the life of a builder easier, right? If they get an ERI produced, they could meet the needs of meeting an above code standard at the same time that they, through this path, could meet the needs of their building code requirement. So, and around that alignment, just to point out, you know, the IRS changes for tax credits for builders is changing so that if you achieve Energy Star, as Energy Star will be defined January 1st of next year, it's $2,500. If you meet the DOE's Energy Ready standard, as it will exist on January 1st, 2023, you'll get $5,000. In addition, if you have a HERS rating of 60 or less, and the mortgage of the buyer is from Freddie Mac, they will provide an incentive. If you reach Energy Star and it's a Fannie Mae mortgage, they will provide an incentive. The printed number, it's hard to find what those incentives actually are and how they travel back to a buyer, for instance. But with Fannie Mae's, you can see that it's a 0.37, it's 37.5 basis points. So it's a 0.375 benefit on the mortgage if they achieve the Energy Star level. That used to seem bigger when mortgages were 3%. It still matters, I think, when mortgages are 7%. Freddie Mac is competitive with Fannie Mae. They're going to be, I'm sure, offering something that's of a similar value for that HERS of 60 or less. So just alignment issues, just so everyone knows why ERI could be a good thing to utilize. And then for the above code programs in Oregon, at least in Energy Trust territory, which does cover over 80% of the state, and higher than that on new construction. They do have a proposal in right now to add the ERI path as an acceptable modeling path to get their incentives. So again, just another opportunity for, because right now, in the world of us green geeks, like they have a slightly different modeling path than the ERI one, but in this big world of trying to make better alignment, they want to now allow for this same modeling path. So there's actually, if we allow this modeling path to be in the code, it would now be aligning with 3 other types for this same using the ERI model, the future tax credits, the Fannie and Freddie mortgage benefits, and Energy Trust of Oregon utility incentives. And so at a nuts and bolts level, the builders most likely to use the ERI path are actually ones who are chasing one of those other incentives, but then would be able to present the local jurisdiction with the documents that they're already producing for the other purpose. In reality, that's how it would probably play out. It's unlikely somebody would go to the trouble of getting an ERI produced just to meet code in Oregon. And that is because since you already have to meet all those other requirements, right? The ERI for code purposes just really replaces the options table. If you want to think about it from the builder's perspective, right? Because they still have to meet all the minimum requirements. And if somebody wants the simplest thing possible, they'll use the options table rather than the ERI pathway. And so that's, to me, as having been a builder, working directly with builders, on a daily basis, that's who this path probably serves, is folks who are already getting an ERI developed for one of those other 3 purposes. And it could also suffice for code purposes. I took a long time there, Mark, but I wanted to try and get that alignment part explained, so people could see how this is likely to be used. And then the only other thing I'll point out, I kept saying Energy Star and DOE Zero Energy Ready as they exist January 1st of next year. There was a public process, the public comments on the new versions of Energy Star and DOE Zero Energy Ready already closed. They started in 2021. And the new versions, so they're not in REM rate yet. They will be in REM rate. The new versions that are going to go into place, I have a link here. I'll plug in the chat. Are actually calling for ERI levels that are lower. They're down in the 40s actually. And it also requires things like, if you have a central ducted system, you have to have a MERV 13 filter, which actually would be great because that would help with all the wildfire smoke.
Fires.
Yeah. So if anybody later wants to look at all that's the feds, and I, have direct relationships on above code stuff with the people at the labs and DOE, and this is what they're very busy wrapping up so that this can be ready for Jan 1. And it's really all on their plate since public comment period's over at this point. And they're just trying to get everything in so that folks like REMRate can get it coded into the software that is used to produce these ERIs. So we may have been hitting the ERIs that were associated with the current DOE Zero Energy Standard and Energy Star, but I just want everyone to know, the full plan from DOE is to have these tougher requirements in place by January 1st, 2023. And because they want their tax credits to be driving the ball forward even more. That's their plan. So sorry for all the time. And Kevin, I'm sure you have more thoughts around your proposal. And but again, our numbers, the 52 and 53 number, we just pulled those from the REACH code that got adopted a couple years ago here, because our understanding and the intent of that REACH code was that having the ERI path there was trying to hit the level that we thought was required to hit the Executive Order 1720 goals. And so we transferred those over as Oregon specific numbers from that reach code. Thank you for your time. I'll look forward to any questions.
I just want to say thanks, David, for the great explanation. It sounds like a great option, and I really think there's a lot of, again, we keep talking about the flexibility of what people want, and I feel like this is in alignment with that. And I also appreciate that it's trying to get all these different standards and things aligning in the same path. So I'm in favor of this.
And Mark Eyes with the division, just to pass a little note along on, yes, so taking what's in the base code, we have done numbers for that, and they're coming out at, for climate zone, they're more in line with climate zone. 4C is around 56, 57, and 5B is the lower number at coming in closer to 55, 56. The 2021 IECC is 54 and 55, which is what is in the Northwest natural gas number. So trying to get a, wanting to make sure the ERI number is actually reflective of the prescriptive path and what we have. And of course, we would have to look at what you would do for things that can't go into the HERS rating, such as if you're doing the smart stat. So we would have to look at those numbers to.
Yeah. And you want just one last, if you want more numbers to think about, what's in the 2024 IEC draft right now is one less than what's in the 2021 IECC. So it's 53 for zone 4 and 54 for zone 5. That's what's been moved forward from the consensus committee and is in the draft for public comment right now in the 2024. So the number would be the same as in ours for zone 4, but it would be a higher, easier to achieve number for zone 5.
I agree with Elizabeth. I think that sounds like a great option as an alternative. I had a question, David, on the numbers that you were just talking about. DOE's numbers are going to be lower come January. So if our numbers are higher, would they still be able to get that certification for the above code programs, or would they have to meet those lower numbers?
If, as I understand right now, whatever numbers DOE puts forward, and they have already put them forward in this public draft that's comment is closed on, they'll have to hit those lower numbers if they want the tax credits. Gotcha. So it is, with the new version, it's going to be tougher than our code to get those tax credits. There'll be, if builders start going on this ERI path, then it'll be easier for them to get there, because then they'll start playing around with what's the next little thing I'm going to use to get my other few numbers down, right?
So we just want to communicate that, not make it look like, oh, if they met this ERI, they're going to get those certification or meet the tax credits. It's actually a little more stringent and not automatic.
Mark, I'm not sure by the time the ORSC is looking at this stuff, or the RMSB committee is looking at this, I think January 1st will already have gone by. And so like what'll be in stone for the tax credits from the IRS will be in print by then. So I think
we could communicate that.
For that, yeah, that'll be available for that communication at that time.
Perfect.
But, yeah.
I also support approval of this option. I wanted to understand if we needed to hear more about Kevin, or hear from Kevin about the Northwest Natural proposal, similar, but.
Sure. And thanks, David. That was a very thorough grounding and background in the ERI. That's fantastic information. And yeah, I think you've delivered a fantastic pitch for this. And obviously I support it. The only difference really between the two proposals is keeping existing modeling as an option or deleting it. And the numbers that are used. Otherwise, there's other details, but relatively, that's it. And to be honest, the Northwest Natural proposal is based on the REACH code language precisely. Only the numbers have changed to match the IECC, as Mark surmised. So that's why it's so short and simple, because that's how it's presented in the REACH code. So David's is a much more extensive and thorough presentation of ERI. And I think the only thing to consider then is, do we keep modeling or not, the existing modeling, and what the numbers should be. So yeah, that comes down to that.
And one note from division standpoint, that is making it so that it is available for everyone throughout the state, and being able to get that third party is a bit of concern under section N1109.7 is put forward, and trying to work out a way so that, yes, that this can take place anywhere in the state, and possibly some how that can work. So
I had a question on that also.
When the full compliance is relying on, of this path is relying on a third party, that might be an issue. We just have had concern expressed from the director. So just to make sure that we're providing that opportunity throughout the state. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, just had a question on that also, where it says that it can be completed by the jurisdiction or a third party. I don't know that we would want to do that as a jurisdiction. Would the jurisdiction be required or expected to if there's not a third party?
So as the proponent, I can say that, it's either or from the perspective of how this could be utilized. So in other parts of the country that have been doing this for the past 7 years, from my knowledge, it's mostly third parties that actually do this. So because the staff don't want to have to learn how to use all this software. Mostly from my knowledge. So whether or not it is a requirement, I'm not the code person. So whether it's a requirement of the local jurisdiction that they would have to provide it if a third party is not available to provide it, I'm not sure. I mean, I've certainly heard folks here say that they were waiving requirements at the local level if they couldn't make sure they happen. But there are people that would provide this service. It is a service that costs people, and it's alternate, so they would have to opt into it, right? But there are people who are willing to go, anywhere in the state to provide this service. It just, having grown up in a very rural, tiny community myself, it just costs more to get somebody to come to your place, right? But it is an alternate pathway. It's not a required pathway. It's something that would replace the use of the options table, is the way I would look at it.
I think you made it clear too, David, that if a builder is going this way, it's not because it's fun and easy. It's hard, and you're going to do it to get other benefits. And then having obtained those benefits, you're going to say, "Hey, code official, I did this. Can I just pass through the process now?" And I would assume that additional cost then would not be a burden, because you're getting benefits on the other side. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
And I should let everybody know, at our nonprofit Earth Advantage that I'm the executive director of, we do supply these services for builders, Habitat for Humanity, production builders, custom builders, and so I'm not here to say this is about driving more business our way, but I wanted to know, like, we do provide this service for builders when they are interested in having this type of information, this approach for their buildings conducted. Just want to make sure.
As a builder, I just want to chime in, and we've consulted with Earth Advantage in the past. It's been a couple of years. But looking at this, there's one thing in the code as it's written in the first paragraph. It states, it's basically just one long sentence, kind of a run-on sentence that ends in, that is in compliance with this chapter. My concern is that is such a vague, broad statement, given all of the different pathways that are addressed in this chapter for energy code. And that's NA 1109 and the first statement in there. It's such a broad statement because there's so many different ways to comply with this chapter. I was actually looking at this yesterday as maybe a possible path that Highline might take in the future. But that opening statement is so broad and so vague because there's so many ways within the chapter that you can comply. I would like to see that statement be revised slightly. Just a couple of words changed would make that more specific. And I can, I'm happy to open that up for anyone to make suggestions, how that could be more specific.
Jamin, can you point out what you're exactly talking about?
So part 2, alternative system analysis, section NA 1109. There's the first statement. So it's right above NA 1109.1.
I see.
And the end of that sentence says that is in compliance with this chapter. But there's so many variations of compliance within this chapter throughout the various additional measures. And I would like to see if that's something that a builder wants to pursue, and then they're going to have to present to a building official how they're going to establish that. I would like for that statement to be a little more specific in, it needs to set more of a specific benchmark to meet or exceed.
I'm still not finding that language.
Jamin, are you sorry, this is David again responding as the proponent. The long sentence that is at the beginning of the old alternate method that in our proposal was crossed out on page 15 of our proposal. Some of that language is retained and is at the beginning of our proposed language, which starts on page 17.
Right, I see it right there.
And so we cut that down a little bit, and then in the very next section, 1109.1, is where we state that the efficiency requirements of section N 1104, have to be, at least equal to, table 1109.1. And so it was really this first paragraph here was saying, hey, like, you have to do the minimum efficiency requirements of this alternate method, or not alternate method, this path have to be the same as if you're just using the regular path where you meet minimum requirements and then add in the measures from the additional measures table. So this paragraph is trying to say, oh, you can't just cheat your way there by putting in a super duper efficient heat pump. Imagine someday there's a, I don't know, 10,000% efficient heat energy machine or something. I don't know. But you can't do that. You still have to do all the basic energy efficiency stuff. And then your rated design has to be better and hit one of these two numbers provided in the table.
I didn't notice that you had that line crossed out, so that pretty much answers my question. If I guess, and then if this proposal is not accepted by the committee, then I would suggest that that first statement be altered, but that'll kind of be determined when everybody votes on it, I guess.
I think it's a good point, though. That sentence, even as it's been revised, makes it look like this could replace the entire chapter. And so maybe it needs clarification of what this is in lieu of, if it's just the energy measures, or if, you know, there's other pieces of chapter 11. It just says this section provides an alternative method of demonstrating code compliance with this chapter. So seems like maybe we need to clarify that a little bit.
So from staff here, we're asking, this italicized language looks like an informative note, the way it's currently written, or is this the scope statement for N1109? David.
Well, I copy and pasted from what was already there in the alternate method and tried to make it relevant to this. So the only reason that italicized statement is there is because there was already an italicized statement in the part that we were recommending to delete.
I mean, even though the title alternate system would sort of assume that, I agree that people are going to think it's in lieu of.
Seems like a pretty quick fix would be something like compliance with the energy requirements of this chapter or something like that.
That seems like a good fix.
Yeah.
Something to narrow it down, you know, if it said with this chapter's prescriptive requirements, or, you know, because there's so many different paths to take within the chapter. Is there a way to narrow it down more specifically?
Well, I mean,
again, if your proposal is accepted, then this is kind of a moot point, but if it's not, then maybe we need to tweak the verbiage of that sentence.
Once, if I may, through the chair to the committee, I mean, one way that this might be dealt with is in not in the italicized note, but in 1109.1, if in addition to N1104, section 1104, it might actually say section 1104, 5, 6, 7, 8, because 1104 is really the shell measures. But it doesn't take into account all the work that's been done, you know, on deeply buried ducks.
Right.
Like, so if you were to, and I would refer to staff on this, but if you were to enumerate in that sentence the additional sections that you didn't want to be, see this as an override to, then I would think one solution would be to enumerate those other sections.
And it's my understanding too that this italicized text is just explanatory, not actual code language, shall we say? Is that true?
That's correct.
In other words, buyer beware, move on to the non-italicized text. And I'm wondering too, has anyone ever proposed this NA 1109 in such a way that would violate code requirements elsewhere? Well, I guess it's never been used, so.
I've never seen it used, so I'm all for replacing it.
We've never used it either. The reason I was looking at it yesterday is just as an alternative to be more cost effective than doing additional measures, which just got voted down. But we build in California where we have to do HERS rating on every home we build. So we already have our HERS rating technicians doing all of that for us in California. I had a conversation with them yesterday about, could you do this for us in Oregon as well? As a more cost-effective measure that might be more beneficial to the homeowner. And so I was looking at this closely yesterday, and that statement kind of jumped out at me as being very broad. That's why I brought it up.
Cool. And to be clear, that what we're looking at on the screen is not what we're talking about right now, right?
Right.
Okay.
Proposal is to get rid of that verbiage. So if everyone votes yes, then it's kind of a irrelevant point.
Right.
And while we're scrolling to that point, in the IECC, what they have is a table of sort of, here are the things that you sort of minimally have to comply with. And the list is, you must meet the additional efficiency package. You must get a certificate from section 401.3. You must have the vapor retarder from R402.1.1. It's, fairly substantive laundry list. And what we have here is really what's in the proposal is sort of to say, you need to make sure you meet the minimum envelope requirements. After that, what you get for your HERS rating is how you, it's up to you to get that. And would you get there without putting in the things that are in the minimum code? It makes it a little different. And within the model code, the language you see in front of you in the italics are not quite what is the 2021 ORSC has a section, what would be the equivalent of NA 1109. Well, no. It starts with NA 1109.1 talking about the scope and then has a separate section on the compliance. Just from what I'm seeing of the model code, the language in italics would just be an informative note, and it's not applying to this at all. So I think we've all been looking at this and saying, so you currently have a proposal of looking at having setting some bare minimums on envelopes. So don't go less than is required on the envelope and then hit a target that we can discuss in a minute. But and I just wanted to give an update on that part, that there's a fairly substantive table that if you're looking to go past this current what's in section NA 1109.1 in front of you.
And if I may, Mark, and to the committee, hitting these numbers in the low 50s, is pretty hard. That's sort of the original intent with setting these numbers in the low to mid 50s was to create something that you really had to get all the basics right first if you're ever going to get to these numbers, right? Like you can't have a lot of air leakage in your house and think that you're going to get down to these numbers as a for instance. You pretty much have to your shell is probably already going to be better than the IECC shell, and then you're going to add good equipment to it to hit these kind of numbers. So when they were first adopted into the IRC and the IECC back in 2015, they were set low to create like a safety factor between the prescriptive code and this type of modeled code. I think because people didn't trust people like me to model necessarily honestly all the time, so they wanted to have a safety factor built in if they were going to allow the modelers to be the ones verifying the code compliance.
Archives Division, yes, thank you. Just to, as a reminder, yes, where the results are for prescriptive is sort of flipped. The 5B numbers are higher than the 4C, and so that this would be an above code for this path more than a safety factor.
And back on the subject of replacing this, replacing the existing modeling option with this, I imagine if someone really wanted to do a modeled home, that they could make an appeal or an alternative path request to the jurisdiction.
Correct. Anybody can ask us to do an alternate method and just show that it meets the same code requirements. So they could always bring it back.
Good point, Kevin. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion or recommendations from the committee at this point? I think we've gone around on it.
This is Rex. I'm just sitting here thinking that this comment I'm about to make is probably about 2 days late, but we haven't really talked much about the residential reach code, and maybe you can tell us what is the purpose of that? When can you cherry pick out of it, or are you all in or all out if you use the reach code? I mean, some of this stuff maybe should go there instead of in the base code. You got any thoughts on that?
Rex, the reach code is sort of its own. It's an optional above code. So it's depending on the paths that are in there, it's sort of an all in. You're going to try and build to the reach code of what's sort of a new prescriptive methodology. Okay. So
it's a prescriptive code and you're all in it if you choose to do that for whatever benefit you might derive from financial.
You're all in, but you don't have. You're doing it as an option. So if you don't make it, you just didn't make the reach code. So
yeah, it's entirely voluntary.
Yeah, but really looks at for you on that.
And if I may, I mean, as Kevin pointed out, like this, the ERI was an alternate energy path. It is an alternate energy path in the current residential reach code. So this was in the last time the residential reach code in Oregon was updated, the ERI path was approved in that process and exists today as an alternate way of achieving the energy performance of the reach code. And so there's a prescriptive way and there's the alternate way. And this is the alternate way in the reach code currently.
And I guess also, just in case this is the way Rex's question was actually intended, when the reach code was put into effect, Rex, it was intended for individual provisions to make it into the residential code to give a forecast to the builders what was likely going to become model Oregon code the next time around. So yeah, the intent was to put in some language and slowly move it over to the ORSC.
Yeah, so given that context and the discussion, it seems like folks are pretty interested in this approach. I'm generally for it as well. So I guess I would propose that we go for the numbers that come from the stretch code, or the reach code, I should say, and choose that version, which also deletes the existing not used performance path. So that would be my recommendation.
I would support changing this, allowing this proposal to go through to replace the current alternate path, with that caveat that the maximum energy is just to the point where it meets the equal to the energy code requirements, not above to meet a program or something like that, since that's not the intent of our codes.
And I guess I second. I know we're not using Robert rules, so I'll back up. Sorry. I support Kevin's proposal. I'm wondering which numbers to use for the target. I noticed that the division has come up with their own set of numbers, and I guess I'd lean towards their guidance on that. So slight alternate proposal than Kevin's.
So in the in the dead air, I'll observe a couple of things. One is we talked about in another proposal the option, the credits approach that we didn't end up going with because it is based on IECC. We didn't want to use national information. We wanted to be true to Oregon's code. The modeling that was done for the REACH code is precisely that. So if the question is what best aligns with the target we're trying to hit and is most in line with what builders are expecting, I think it would be hard to argue with the fact that those are the REACH code numbers. And that would be in David Heslam's proposal. Somebody mentioned, Kevin Duell mentioned the BCD numbers, and they acknowledge that there are things that in their modeling they haven't accounted for yet, additional efficiency measures that would drive their numbers lower or less efficient in ERI speak. So I wanted to include that caveat out there. It's a lot of numbers floating around, but yeah, I would.
I need to make a clarification about the numbers, if you don't mind. The REACH code was based on 3 additional measures. So they aren't in the REACH code was not in line with what is the current, and we haven't run ERI numbers on what was in the REACH code. So just want to make that clear that this is not the REACH code that is the baseline code this time around. So
that's why my support for this is based on what is equal to what we're proposing the base code is, because this is supposed to be an alternative to that, not an above code requirement.
David?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the REACH code was based on 3 measures, but at a lower base. It was 3 measures above a less efficient base. And now we made this, the 2023 draft makes the base better and has the 2 measures on top of it. So that's why I was thinking they were still in alignment with in that way. And I think, I mean, there's another suggestion, another set of numbers I threw out there earlier too, which was what's been in the draft for the 2024 IECC, which is a 53 in 4C, basically the valley, and a 54 in zone 5, central Oregon and east. So if that might be a compromise position to take in terms of between what was in the REACH code and what's currently in the 2021 IECC as a suggestion. Thank you.
For myself, I'd have to keep going back to what the current 1109 says. The intent of this whole alternative is to meet compliance with the code that is adopted, not to be above the code that's adopted or anything. So really to be consistent with how the mini-maxi code is supposed to work in theory, it should be an alternative to just what the code minimum is.
And to Jonathan's point, what I'm hearing is we don't know what those numbers are. Is that true?
Doesn't sound like it. I think that would be somebody would have to model it and then just place them in there correctly.
This is Rex. So Jonathan, you sort of made a motion. Is that correct? And to which proposal are you favoring?
So I'm okay with accepting David's proposal, whatever number that one is, forgot in front of me. But with the caveat that the maximum ERI number is only limited to what is equal to whatever the modeling for the proposed BCD numbers and all of our little tweaks that we've been doing throughout this time would show equivalent C2, since that's the intent of the state code, is to be an equal, not a above.
This is Rex again. I could be in support of that. Mark, did you want to add something to that?
If there were just a recommendation for us to look, and we could work with someone like NEEA and go through and come up with what would be here is an ERI target that's appropriate for our climate zones, 4C and 5B in particular, we'd be happy to do that. And then bring that to the board if that was just a recommendation for us to come up with a number. So
what Mark said.
Sounds good to me.
I agree with that.
I support that.
I'm fine with that.
Agree as well.
David.
As the proposer, my only concern is that then the numbers are totally out of the control of myself as the proposer. And what if
right?
What if the numbers come back and they're really high? Like,
right?
Can we put a top side on this? Like, Kevin, the current, I don't think they should be higher than the current IECC. As a
they need to be. They need to be somewhat equivalent to the residential code itself. Again, this is not a program. This is not an above code. This isn't the reach code. This is just showing equivalent to the code that we're wanting BCD to adopt. So as long as it's in line with that, that should make everybody happy.
I'll just again say, in general, the approach to using ERIs for code rather than for programs is people like to have a safety factor. Because when somebody like me puts a little gold star on something, it's a nice to have. When the code officials said this building was built to code, it's a must have. So that in general, there's always been a safety factor put in against the modeling, and these numbers get set lower, and to make sure nobody can game the numbers. Right. Again, like, I'm impugning myself here that you to say people don't necessarily trust folks like me and my staff get it right. And so they want these numbers to be a little on the conservative side to that end. And so, Jonathan, I would just push back on that point. Like, even though I would be making life harder for my team and the builders that we work with, I do think that safety factor is an important thing to include.
Wow. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a safety factor, but the safety factor should only be the margin of error of the software itself. So ResNet will tell us that, their software is good for 3%. So yeah, you can have that type of safety factor. That seems reasonable. And BCD already kind of hinted at that by saying, we'll work with NEEA to see what is appropriate for our climate zone. So Mark may have already figured in okay, let's have a rounding error, because I'm sure Mark already does that for when they do their own analysis.
And I guess to summarize, sorry, Kevin, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to mention the added level of complexity. While, generally in support of working with BCD as folks have suggested and identified us as a potential partner in working that out. Happy to do that and follow the will of the committee on that one. I did want to highlight that while I understand this is a better situation than when I was doing lots of run rate HERS modeling a decade ago. Home size is a non-trivial input into this, and as I understand it, all of the, or at least the lion's share of the modeling that's been done, at least to support what you saw, the analysis that you saw from BCD was based on a single home size. And that, that home size, if you're going to pick one, it's a pretty good, it's a pretty good selection. As I understand it, it's pretty reflective of the construction marketplace. However, if we're talking about, using that not just as a analysis of the prescriptive code, but as, essentially the code itself, it's possible that we'd want to get more certainty around different home sizes to make sure that we're not unintentionally, for example, unintentionally incentivizing large construction, which again, a decade ago, it was easier to get a better score with a HERS than for a smaller home. I understand it's a little bit better now than it used to be, but yeah, from among other things, the desire to increase the affordability of homes by making homes smaller. We certainly do not want to do things that would push against that. That's it.
Thank you, Kevin. I would agree with that.
And just a couple things. I think to put David's concern into to simplify it dramatically, I think what you're saying, David, is adopt your proposal, but have a ceiling with the numbers from the Northwest Natural proposal, or ceiling, whatever the ceiling floor is. You know what I mean? Use those numbers as a max. And I'm noticing all of this is, of course, a recommendation to the board, and they make the decision. We're just giving them recommendations.
Right.
And as a side note, I know we're not using Robert's rules, but if we were, once a proposal is made, the body owns it, not the proponent, and whatever it becomes is the work of the body, despite what the proponent thinks. I know that's not what we're doing here, but yeah, sometimes things go in ways you don't expect. But I think that's a reasonable consideration to have a ceiling.
Is that would that work for everyone about?
That works for me.
Then we can still look at what goes to the board and make sure that, that again, yes, they will have a final look and review on it. So
that makes sense.
And the board may say, well, we don't care about your ceiling.
Right.
So it's up to them.
That sets the 2021 IECC numbers as the highest they will go for our review and what would go to the board.
Okay.
Is that the numbers in the proposal, the 53 and the 52?
That is the Northwest Natural version of course, I'm not going to see them right now. 54 and 55. Yeah.
Yeah, 54 and 55.
Yeah.
All right.
Oof.
We get them. In time.
I think
We
so.
take a break.
Oh, we're done.
I think we're done
Are we done?
No way.
for today.
For just one chapter, you only have 40 more to go, guys. So.
But the rest of it will take less than this one.
So I am curious on the other chapters, and I think you guys have said you're still working on them as the division of, are there other changes besides just the code change proposals on the website?
Yeah, there'll be some division proposals as well. And then of course, anything can be introduced. But yeah.
I know we're in Deschutes County hoping for a change on the definition of accessory structure and potentially R328 going away. Is that a division change, or is that something that we should submit a code change proposal?
That will be a division recommendation.
Okay, perfect.
Adelaide?
Yes, I just have a question. Maybe I missed it in the last two meetings. We all talk about the meeting the executive order. Will we revisit these if the executive order is rescinded based on the election coming up?
I have no idea.
Okay, sorry, since I had talked to Alana a while ago, and I think they had said they were taking two approaches, one if it gets rescinded and one didn't. So I wasn't quite sure if we were still, you know, because if that executive order gets rescinded and we no longer have the demands of the executive order, you know, what are, you know, we have different targets. And so I didn't know if it was intentional that we did the energy code changes before the election next week, or what, if there's been discussion when that, if that executive order gets rescinded.
No, nothing was intentional there. And there hasn't been any I haven't been given any direction or anything at all, or I don't think Mark has on this. So again, just like we talked about this, none of this gets ratified until it goes to the board and then gets, you know, secondarily ratified by the administrator. So there's a ways to go in this. So you know, our process has nothing to do with elections or outcomes or whether the IDO would come or not. I don't know. There's no
Problem. We are hoping over here that the executive order is rescinded and that things slow down just a little bit. I know the energy folks in the room don't want to hear that, but I know that there's a lot of people that are hoping for that. So not that it'll change the end run in about 20 years, but if we could slow things down a bit, we would sure appreciate it. So I was just wondering if it had been discussed. Thank you.
So that puts us at the end of energy. We'll start again on the 30th. That's the next meeting date. And we should start from I think we're planning on starting from the beginning and going through. The staff still is working on putting together the rest of our proposals and clean it up and get the matrix and everything ready for the committee, and we'll get that out as soon as we can before the meetings, so you can take a look at it. We'll pick up the other piece of the energy puzzle. I think we articulated this previously in 320. The solar piece will be discussed. Those pieces will be discussed with chapter 3. Anything else, Mark? Laura? Anything else from anybody on the committee?
No.
Thank
I
you.
won't be able to make the 30th, but I will have an alternate from Northwest Natural. It's actually one of the applicants to be on this committee, so they'll be fully informed and ready to roll.
Great, thanks.
And I've cleared that with Laura already. So
I was just going to say, I hope it's okay with Laura. Thank you, and thank you for those who submitted proposals and took the time to testify, and of course the community members as well for your time. So,
quick follow up on what Kevin just mentioned. I will likely be in DC at a meeting. I assume if Kevin found a way, that means I could maybe look for someone to attend in my stead, and I should work with Laura on that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everybody, thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, everybody. Have a good holiday.